Picking up from the previous chapter, Shenlang demanded that Lan Dian memorize 5,000 characters in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, a seemingly impossible feat. Yet, Lan Dian managed to remember every single word. As expected, a talent handpicked by Shenlang was no ordinary person. However, Lan Dian couldn't help but worry about his brothers. While he himself possessed this superhuman memory, what chance did his crippled comrades have in any competition? Shenlang immediately put his worries to rest. Li Dangok Big Idiot proved that while ordinary people must train in either literature or martial arts, for Shenlang, anything was possible. Meanwhile, the insidious Chu Zhaoyan secretly poisoned Coutiuan. In agony, spitting up blood, he cried out in confusion, "Why use poison? You could have killed me with your sword." Then he screamed in despair, "Kill me with your own hands, end my life yourself. It seems dying for a woman is truly a bitter end. I gave you my love, and you played me for a fool." His wish was granted. With a cold expression, Shu Zhaoyan drew her sword and plunged it straight into his chest. Blood gushed out like rain, but that was just the external wound. The wound in his heart was the most painful. The merciless blade was gently pulled from his body. Coutiuan staggered, tears of blood streaming down his face. Just then, Shu Zhaoyan spoke with cold contempt, "Useless trash. Die." With that, she kicked him decisively, sending him plunging into the raging river below. His fate was left to the currents, with death being the most likely outcome. Would a miracle save him? From above, Shu Zhaoyan watched as his body sank and disappeared into the water. She felt no pity, even laughing triumphantly. Haha, the cheapest things in this world are brainless brutes. Stupid, yet they try to act tough. An unknown amount of time passed. 20 miles downstream on the Nujum River, Li Tangyu was steering his raft when he spotted a body floating in the water. Without hesitation, he used a pole to pull the corpse onto his raft. It was Coutiuan, his face purple and bruised. Li Tangyu examined him and thought, no heartbeat, no breath. Is he really dead? Shenlang had once said, if they're alive, I want to see the person. If they're dead, I want to see the body. With that in mind, Li Tangyu wasted no time, carrying Coutiuan's body through rivers and forests back to the capital. At the same time, the Chu Kingdom's diplomatic mission had been in the capital of the Yu Kingdom for over a month, with negotiations dragging on endlessly. Every day, both sides exchanged verbal jabs, their words faster than bullets, yet the result was a big zero. To be fair, the Chu Kingdom was on the losing side of the recent conflict, but they acted as if they were in charge, demanding the Yu Kingdom admit fault. In the recent Three Kingdom conflict, the Wu Kingdom suffered the most, losing over 40,000 soldiers and an untold number of civilians. The Chu Kingdom, while seemingly less affected, had also suffered enough to make their king spit blood. Their efforts to support the Su clan's rebellion had come to nothing with the death of Su Nan, and a decade's worth of trade concessions were lost. With the Wu and Yu kingdoms now allied, the Chu Kingdom was on the defensive. The Yu Kingdom pressed its advantage, demanding not only the return of occupied lands but also two additional conditions. First, a public apology from the Chu Kingdom, and second, compensation of 3 million gold coins. These were terms the Chu Kingdom could never accept, leading to a stalemate. When the negotiations were at their most tense, someone from the palace asked if Shenlang wanted to join the delegation. He couldn't be bothered, the matter could drag on for years. His entire focus was on Lan Dian and the others. By now, the whole capital knew that Shenlang had not only recruited 11 crippled beggars but was also making them take the autumn civil service examination, insisting they all pass. This absurd news once again caused a stir. This madman can't sit still. People gossip. A beggar taking the Imperial exam. Hilarious, the capital's exam candidates were the best of the best. For someone like Lan Dian, who had never studied, to compete and pass seemed impossible. If he and those 10 other beggars all pass, one person declared, I'll eat 10 pounds of dung for the world to see. Not only the common people but also the royal court was in an uproar. Every day, censors submitted memorials impeaching Shenlang and the monarch, Ning Jen. They argued that allowing beggars to take the exam was an insult to the sages and demanded that Shenlang be punished and the 11 beggars expelled. The king, Ning Yuangxian, though annoyed by the daily complaints, calmly waved them off, postponing the discussion while silently cursing Shenlang for causing him so much trouble. However, Shenlang was incredibly busy. He spent his days in a secret chamber, researching blood and goo insects. I've run 1,700 experiments, he thought, holding a sample. It seems there's only one final step. Meanwhile, Lan Dian memorized books, poems, and essays daily, retaining everything after a single reading. He would finish his studies in just 3 hours and spend the rest of his day relaxing. This baffled a bookworm like Jin Mudong, who couldn't understand how Lan Dian could be so carefree. When not studying, Lan Dian would flirt with Han Nu, read miscellaneous books, or practice fortune-telling. Jin Mudong was particularly disgusted by Lan Dian's taste in women. There were beautiful female slaves in the guard detail, Yet he was interested in Han Nu, who was fat and unattractive. Once, Jin Meetum bluntly asked him, Lan Dian, why do you like Han Nu? Your taste is strong. Lan Dian calmly replied, in your eyes, she is a 280-pound Han Nu. In my eyes, she is the future 130-pound Han Nu, a stunning, untouched beauty. It's called investing in potential. Understand? Jin Meetum was skeptical. Han Nu would probably never want to lose weight. It would weaken her combat strength. Lan Dian said confidently, for the one she loves, she will be willing to change. Han Nu, overhearing, chimed in your dreams, I'll never notice you. You're too young and naive. 2 days later, while Shenlang was sleeping with Xiaobing, an urgent voice called out, young master, the Sword King has returned. Shenlang sat up. Xiaobing sleepily asked what was wrong. It's nothing, he reassured her, go back to sleep. He dressed and went outside. In the secret chamber, Li Tangqiu had placed Coutiuan's body on a bed. It's strange, the Sword King said. There's no breath, no heartbeat, but the body hasn't decomposed for days. Shenlang immediately took out a needle to test for poison. After confirming the potent poison, he used his X-ray vision to examine the body. The sword wound was right over the heart, but Coutiuan's heart was on the opposite side. His organs were mirrored. Shenlang knew then that Coutiuan was actually Zhu Yichin, a martial arts prodigy who passed the exam at 18. Due to a physical transformation, he was taken to the Tanya Hage for treatment and became a disciple because of his outstanding bloodline talent. He left to avenge his family, and ended up in his current state. Young master, is he really Coutiuan? Han Nu asked, her voice full of admiration. Yes. You admire him? Shenlang replied. Of course, she said. Whether as a martial champion, or a great thief, he reached the pinnacle. He's a legend. Is he truly dead? I don't know, Shenlang said, thinking to himself that although Coutiuan's brain should be dead, his unique bloodline might be sustaining it. Can you save him? Li Tangqiu asked impatiently. Shenlang took out a test tube. I'm 80% sure, he said seriously. For the past 6 months, Shenlang's research into Gu insects and Big Idiot's golden bloodline had led to a new, endlessly regenerating energy source. The only problem was a neurotoxin. However, by crossbreeding these insects with a strain from the Sword King's body, he had created a non-toxic version capable of transforming a human's bloodline. Experiments on death row inmates had all failed, with the subjects being drained dry and exploding. His experiment was 99.99 complete. Coutiuan was the perfect final test subject. If he could be saved, the same method could be used on the 10 beggars to awaken their bloodlines. Without hesitation, Shenlang injected the substance into Coutiuan's body. Coutiuan, he thought, the final 0.1 of this experiment is up to you. Minutes passed with no reaction. Coutiuan remained motionless. Shenlang, be patient, Li Tangqiu said reassuringly. It might take a few hours to see any effect. But Shenlang, observing with his special vision, knew something was wrong. The Zhu insects were active, multiplying, and excited, yet the host showed no response. Did it fail? He wondered. Failure meant not only losing Coutiuan, but also redoing many experiments, and missing the deadline for the Imperial examinations. But just then thump, 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 a powerful, steady heartbeat rang out. The heart in Coutiuan's chest suddenly began to beat violently. He was alive, alive, alive. Sword King Li Tangqiu was ecstatic. Shenlang had actually saved Coutiuan. It was truly beyond imagination. But did this also mean that the poison in his own wife's body could be cured? Shenlang asked, Senior Sword King, if you compare Fuji Mountain and Tanya Hage, which one is more powerful? The Sword King shook his head. It's not a good comparison. Tanya Hage is like a sacred place of knowledge, revered by the world, but it doesn't inspire fear. Fuji Mountain, however, represents terrifying mystery. There is a saying that circulates throughout the land, it is better to offend a monarch than to offend Fuji Mountain. That alone proves everything. Based on Shenlang's impression, Fuji Mountain specialized in creating poisons, but that wasn't the whole truth. To be precise, Fuji Mountain dabbled in the occult, alchemy, potent poisons, and internal cultivation arts. Everything they had was rare and esoteric. The disciples of Fuji Mountain who walked the outside world were outsiders making a pilgrimage. However, this organization had no moral bottom line. The power of their poisons was immense, and should never have been allowed to spread, yet some powerful factions could still obtain various toxins from them. Grandmaster Zhang Shike had been at Fuji Mountain for months, and the Divine Maiden and Shu Yin had been gone for 3 or 4 months now, with no word. It was truly worrying. It now seems this Gu insect is some kind of vessel, Sword King Li Tangqiu said. It devours any substance and then continuously releases that same substance. Shenlang nodded. This Gu insect from Fuji Mountain did indeed seem almost omnipotent. Since arriving in this world, everything Shenlang had encountered had been relatively normal, without much of a mystical aura. Even the species were 99 identical to those on Earth. But this Gu insect was something that absolutely did not exist on Earth. It was the first time he had ever seen or heard of such a thing. Shenlang asked, Senior Sword King, where do you think this Fuji Mountain Gu insect comes from? Did they create it themselves? Li Tangqiu shook his head. No. It must have been excavated from the ancient world. The ancient world. No wonder Zhuo Si, the master of Tanya Hage, forgoes even his own sect to constantly explore ancient ruins overseas. No wonder the Great Calamity Temple mobilizes countless resources every year in search of ancient civilizations. Once found, it could mean the rise of a new power. Of course, Zhuo Si was likely not seeking power, he was simply obsessed with the civilizations of the ancient world. Li Tangqiu then asked, when will he wake up? It will take 2 or 3 days, Shenlang replied. At that moment, Coutiuan's heartbeat and breathing had returned, but he was still unconscious. Shenlang used his enhanced vision to observe his blood. Inside, the golden bloodline Gu insects swarmed tirelessly, modifying, regenerating, and multiplying. Young master, can you please pay some attention to Lanfenzi? Han Nu said. Tell him to stop staring at me. Why? Shenlang asked. Is his gaze too vulgar? Han Nu shook her head. No. She wasn't afraid of vulgar stares, she had seen too many. For a long time, the female wrestlers she performed with wore nothing at all. Of course, every female wrestler was extremely heavyset, and not particularly attractive, but there were plenty of men with strong tastes, or at least curiosity. Shenlang smiled. Then why don't you want him to look at you? Because he looks at me as if I were a great beauty, Han Nu said. But from top to bottom, I'm just ugly. It's just so strange. There's that kind of person, I suppose, Shenlang said. Alright, I'll try, but I can't manage every little thing for him. Han Nu hesitated. You want to ask about Ning Jen, don't you? Shenlang said. Han Nu nodded. Her Highness the Princess was taken by the Imperial clan court months ago. She should have been released by now. Why hasn't she been? Besides, His Majesty dotes on you so much. If you just asked for leniency, he would surely release the third princess. Shenlang explained, it's not that His Majesty doesn't want to release Ning Jen. The heir of Dream Cloud Marsh went to the Yan Empire to ask the regent prince to annul the engagement and free Princess Ning Jen. He hasn't returned yet, which means things aren't going smoothly. Therefore, we can't provoke the Yan Empire right now. Ning Jen has been moved to a different courtyard within the Imperial clan court, completely different from the cell where His Highness Ning Jen was held. His Majesty is keeping her confined for her own good, so that she can eventually gain her complete freedom. I understand. Thank you, young master, Han Nu said, relieved. Lanfenzi's talent was astonishing. Even to Shenlang. He still memorized the essays Shenlang compiled for him every day, and his speed was getting faster and faster. But that wasn't all. He could memorize the essays while simultaneously reading Battle Through the Heavens and ancient books, mostly commentaries on the I Ching, without missing a beat. Shenlang had tested him. Not only could he recite the essays perfectly, but he could also recite Battle Through the Heavens in its entirety. The only thing that took him any effort were the ancient commentaries, which were, of course, his favorite. Lanfenzi was already 13 when he became a war refugee. Since then, he had wandered through various kingdoms, finding any way he could to read. Nearly all his knowledge was self-taught. Now, with Shenlang providing him with a continuous supply of books, he read with obsessed delight. While juggling 3 different texts in his mind, he still found time to flirt with Han Nu with his eyes. Such talent was truly astounding. The comparison between people was enough to drive one mad with frustration. Consort Bayan's health had fully recovered. She would summon Ning Jen to the palace every 4 or 5 days, but she never spoke of politics. The harem was not to interfere in state affairs, and she adhered to that rule strictly. When Ning Jen came, it was simply to have a meal with her. Today, Consort Bayan finally couldn't hold it in any longer. Jenner, the special civil examination is only 35 days away, and the martial exam is only 39 days away. Yes, Ning Jen replied. Do you want mother to find a great scholar to teach Lanling? She asked. A little last-minute cramming is better than nothing. She had heard that Lanfenzi spent his days at Ning Jen's estate either reading Battle Through the Heavens and other novels or studying divination books. He wasn't reading the 4 books and 5 classics at all. With just over a month until the exam, it was certainly too late to start studying the required knowledge from scratch, but he should at least show the right attitude. While cramming might not be very effective, it would be less embarrassing when the time came. Thank you, Mother Consort, but it's not necessary, Ning Jen said. Shenlang is teaching Lanling himself. His mother was speechless. That troublemaker Shenlang was unreliable. When it came to exams, he hadn't even passed the county-level examination himself. His provincial graduate title was something he had swindled from His Majesty, yet he was teaching others. Those were Ning Yuanxian's own words, or rather, the emperor had said it was closer to a threat than a swindle, a higher level of coercion. And he wasn't wrong. At the time, when Shenlang was sent as an envoy to the Kun Kingdom, his rank couldn't be too low. The status of an Imperial college student wasn't enough, so Shenlang had demanded a degree from the emperor. He initially wanted a doctorate, but Ning Jen couldn't grant that, so they settled on a provincial graduate title. In that sense, Shenlang was an insult to the examination system. I've also heard, Consort Bayan continued, that for days, the 10 men preparing for the martial exam haven't had a single martial arts instructor. They haven't practiced archery or horsemanship either. They just loaf around the house, bragging. Ning Jen didn't know how to respond, because his mother was right. The 10 beggars had been at his estate for about 10 days and hadn't practiced martial arts or ridden a horse for a single day. Shenlang had tested them once, and the results were disastrous. Forget archery from horseback, none of them could even get on a horse that was standing still. They couldn't even crawl onto it because their bodies were all twisted and half crippled. Their archery was even more pathetic. Forget a one-stone bow, none of them could even draw a half-stone bow. For the past few days, the 10 beggars had followed their usual routine, eat, sleep, and then eat again. After that, they would lie around all day, bragging and talking nonsense until their heads spun. They bragged so much that even an honest person like Ning Jen couldn't stand to listen. Each one of them claimed to be capable of anything under the sun. Furthermore, they all boasted about their relationships with peerless beauties in some kingdom or other, how some young lady from a wealthy family had taken a fancy to them, and wanted to make them her live-in husband, but they, with their unyielding spirit, refused. They had forsaken glory and wealth for freedom. In reality, among the 10 of them, Lanfenzi was the best off. At least he had slept with women who charged a silver coin for 10 sessions countless times. The other 9 were all virgins. Yet, each one bragged as if he were a seasoned veteran in the bedroom. If you lasted less than an hour, you wouldn't dare speak up in this group. Of course they couldn't lie about that little thing, because they were all too familiar with each other's, having seen them probably 1,000 times. Lanfenzi, who had once slept with a woman for no more than 5 minutes, brazenly boasted that he lasted for 2 hours. Doesn't Shenlang manage them? Consort Bayan asked. Not only did Shenlang not manage them, he spent an hour every day bragging right along with them. And Shenlang's boasts were even more unbelievable. He claimed to have traveled to the sky and the bottom of the sea, to have journeyed 10,000 miles in a year. Do you think your son Wukong? Indeed, Journey to the West, written by the great master Jin Muon, was all the rage. Ning Jen, his scalpnum, could only reply, Shenlang has it under control. In fact, Shenlang only cared about one thing with these beggars, personal hygiene. He had the strong female guards hold them down for daily baths, scrubbing them with brooms. Everyone had to brush their teeth twice a day. If anyone dared to urinate in the wrong place, they get flicked on the testicles 30 times with a terrifyingly elastic animal tendon. If someone dared to defecate indiscriminately, the solution was even simpler, their anus would be plugged for 3 days. The thought of the testicle flicking made Ning Jen shudder violently. The screams of those 2 men had been horrifyingly clear from 2 miles away. What on earth is that troublemaker Shenlang trying to do? Consort Bayan said. With just over a month, there's no hope for the special examination. She then continued to comfort him gently, Jenner, it's fine not to compete for the throne. A lifetime of peace, doing what you love, is better than anything. It was clear that Consort Bayan had lost all hope in Shenlang. Ning Jen didn't know how to respond. Consort Bayan then asked, where is His Majesty? Hasn't he come over yet? A eunuch outside replied, His Majesty is still reviewing memorials. Consort Bayan sighed inwardly. The emperor still disliked Ning Jen. Every time she tried to create an opportunity for father and son to dine and talk together, the emperor would avoid coming to her place if Ning Jen was there. Even if he was hungry, he would wear himself out in his study, reviewing memorials. Reviewing my foot, Ning Yuangshan, you are not a diligent monarch. You just glance at most memorials before sending them to the Grand Secretariat for detailed review, and then you only read the important ones they select. You just don't want to be with Ning Jen. After the meal, Ning Jen rose to leave. I will come visit Mother Consort again in a few days. All right. Consort Bayan did not see him off, only following him with her gentle gaze. In her opinion, there was no need for such formalities between mother and son. Sure enough, not even 15 minutes after Ning Jen left, the emperor arrived. Consort Bayan gave her husband a reproachful look. My apologies, Ning Yuanxian said. I was truly too busy. You've been reviewing memorials for hours. Busy or not, you know the truth in your heart. You held that last memorial for over half an hour. You haven't finished reading those 200 words yet. Resigned, Consort Bayan went to prepare some food for the emperor. She found that her husband's shamelessness was exactly like Shenlang's. After his heartbeat returned, Coutiuan remained in a coma for 3 days and 3 nights. Although he was unconscious, he was not completely unaware. It was as if his whole being was submerged in a dream. All the events of his past replayed rapidly in his mind. Even memories from his early childhood surfaced in fragments. Of course, the clearest memories were of his life with the Jiu family after he fled to the Yu kingdom, and was adopted by them. He had never been truly happy. Initially, he was just a lowly servant. Only after his martial talent blossomed did Jiu Guanbo adopt him. But he could tell his adoptive father didn't genuinely like him. Instead, he suppressed him, forcing him to practice martial arts every day but forbidding him from learning to read. Every day, he was brainwashed, told that everything he had was given to him by the Jiu family, and that he must serve them for the rest of his life, ready to die for them. At the time, Shu Yichen didn't understand why his adoptive father wouldn't let him read. He thought, as his father said, that reading was useless, and he shouldn't waste time on it. He needed to focus solely on martial arts. Later, he realized his adoptive father wanted him to remain simple-minded. His father felt that if he learned too much, he would think too much, and it would be difficult to maintain his innocence. There was one scene Shu Yichen remembered clearly. Initially, Shu Zhaoyan's attitude toward him was extremely cold. She treated him like a servant. But during a period when he was particularly dejected, and his martial arts progress had slowed, Shu Zhaoyan appeared before him like a little angel, speaking to him with a warm smile and great intimacy. From that moment, Shu Yichen began to fall for her. Now, he could see it clearly. Shu Zhaoyan's affection that day was all an act. From beginning to end, she had never truly liked him, or even looked at him as an equal. Shu Zhaoyan had always seen him as a servant, not an adoptive brother. When the dream shifted to Tanya Hage, some things became clear, and others became hazy. Zuosai was his master, yet in his dream, Coutiuan's impression of him was particularly vague, as if he couldn't remember his face. Zuosai had two other disciples, Princess Ninghan and Zhu Hongxiu. He had only met Zhu Hongxiu and never seen Ninghan. However, his life and studies at Tanya Hage became incredibly vivid, especially the times he was scolded by his teacher, Zhang Yuyan. Every scene was clear, and so happy. Yes, that period of his life at Tanya Hage was warm and happy. There were no ulterior motives, no deceit. Although his grades in mathematics and literature were terrible and he was scolded every day, that time of pure learning was truly joyful. Every moment at Tanya Hage felt free. Moreover, during his time there, he practiced martial arts for less than 2 hours a day, yet his skill level soared, progressing much faster than when he had trained arduously every day with the Jiu family. But one day, that happy life came to an end. The Jiu family was annihilated. Shu Yichen had to cut short that incredibly happy period of his life. He escaped from Tanya Hage, feeling he had a responsibility to seek revenge and protect Jiu Zhaoyan. Next were the memories of the thief, Coutiuan. His mind seemed to instinctively reject all of it. Besides, these memories were too recent, and didn't need careful recollection. The images flashed by faster and faster, finally freezing on the last scene, Shu Zhaoyan poisoning him, Shu Zhaoyan stabbing a sword through his chest, and then kicking him into the Nujin River. Idiot. After replaying the memories in his head, those were the only 2 words in Coutiuan's mind. Thank goodness for Shenlang coining such a pathetic word. Otherwise, he really couldn't find a suitable term to describe himself. So stupid. So pathetic. All of this was because of his deep, obsessive love for Jiu Zhaoyan. Love truly makes people lose their minds. Coutiuan felt as if he had been in a long dream, as if 20 years had passed in that dream. That one sword strike from Jiu Zhaoyan had completely awakened him. Stupid, truly stupid. Coutiuan couldn't help but raise his hand, and slap his own head. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Then, his eyes snapped open. He was awake. He found himself in an unfamiliar room, with no one around. His whole body felt light. Before, it was as if he was enveloped by a gray energy, but now he felt surrounded by light. That familiar feeling returned the comfortable feeling of reading books at Tanya Hage. Coutiuan leaped up and found that he felt no pain. For years, he had been tormented by constant agony, pain from his internal organs, pain from his distorted face, pain from deep within his bloodline. The pain was almost uncontrollable, but because it was always there, like breathing, he had almost stopped noticing it. Now that the pain was gone, he felt as if he could fly. Coutiuan was about to walk out the door when he noticed a large mirror in the room. He couldn't help but step forward to look. Then, he was completely stunned. Who was this handsome man? Of course, Shu Yichen had always been handsome. It was only after his face became disfigured that he became terrifyingly ugly. Now, suddenly seeing his normal face restored, it was as if he was looking at a peerless beauty. Then, Coutiuan was overcome with joy. My face is back to normal, my body is back to normal, where are the twisted skin and burn-like scars? They're all gone. What on earth happened? What did Shenlang do to me? What kind of magic does he possess? He knew it was Shenlang who had saved him. After his heartbeat and breathing returned, even while in a coma, he had heard things. Outrage, Coutiuan let out a series of shouts, staring at himself in the mirror for a full 15 minutes. For years, his disfigured face had forced him to wear a twisted mask. He pretended not to care, but deep down, his self-esteem was shattered. That's why he gave himself the moniker Coutiuan Bitterhead. Now that his face was restored, he had been given a new life. The past 20 years truly felt like a cursed, slumbering dream. Now, he had escaped. Ao the Chuo family nothing more. Ao Chuoyan nothing more. He joyfully pushed open the door and walked outside. It was now autumn. The sunlight was warm but not hot, casting a golden glow. Some trees had begun to lose their leaves, while others were heavy with fruit. Was the scenery always this beautiful? Except for his few years at Tanya Hage, Shu Yichen had never had the time or energy to pay attention to the world around him. Only now did he feel how wonderful the world was. However, after he stepped into the courtyard, the scene was somewhat pathetic. Thin bald-headed men were practicing martial arts, and each of their bodies was more or less twisted and abnormal. After lazing around for more than 10 days, you finally remember to practice martial arts, he thought. But is this what you call practicing? The bows in your hands can't weigh more than 30 pounds, can they? Those are for children to practice with, and even then, none of you can even draw them properly. To draw a bow, you must stand straight with your back erect. You look like you want to lie on the ground to do it. After a grueling 15 minutes of practice, one of them said, "Rest, rest, today was clearly too hard, too difficult." That's right. Practicing martial arts is really too hard. There aren't many diligent people like us these days. I think we should change the rules. Let's practice for 15 minutes and rest for half an hour. What do you think? Half an hour? What's the point of that? Let's round it up and rest for 2 hours. Alright, it's decided then. Practice for 15 minutes, rest for 2 hours. We're just too hard working. The 10 beggars practiced drawing their bows for less than 5 minutes, and then prepared to lie down and rest for 4 hours. Lying there in the courtyard, they started bragging again. Coutiuan was about to explode. This group of people had no ambition at all. He was a man accustomed to leading troops, a man who had won the title of martial arts champion. He was the type to wake up and practice at the crow of the rooster, to find ways to stay awake late at night to train. And these people were so lazy. If you were under my command, he thought, your corpses would have long been cold. Every one of Coutiuan's brothers had been personally trained by him, each one capable of fighting 10 men. His small force of 200 men could move like the wind, invincible in their campaigns. Coutiuan couldn't tolerate a single grain of sand in his eyes. He immediately wanted to find a whip to beat them. At this rate, you won't be ready for the battlefield in 100 years. Just then, Shenlang and Ning Jen walked out. The 10 beggars paid them no mind, still lying on the ground bragging without any fear. This was because Shenlang had always been too good to them. As long as they didn't relieve themselves in the wrong place, he didn't manage them much. He even joined them in their bragging sessions every day. The key was, his boasts were so funny they made people die of laughter. As for His Highness Ning Jen, although he was serious, he was also short and dark, and never got angry. So, they had no reason to be afraid. These men had been vagrants for 20 years, and every one of them was lazy to the bone. Without fear, getting them to stand up and salute was impossible. It was too much effort to even stand. Young Master Shen, your 5th Highness, greetings to you 2 great sirs. Where is female General Wu Lai? That's right, I haven't seen General Wu Lai's ass for over an hour. It's clearly the roundest. Number 1. Coutiuan walked up to Shenlang, his expression a little strange. In his heart, he was incredibly grateful for his life being saved. It was more than just saving his life, it was giving him a new one. But Coutiuan just didn't want to kneel before others, nor did he want to show a tearful display of gratitude. Perhaps it was a kind of rebellion. The Zhuo family had demanded he live that way, reminding him of the debt of his adoption dozens of times a day, reminding him to be utterly devoted to them, demanding Zhuo Yichen's loyalty. In fact, Zhuo Yichen had been more loyal than anyone. After the Zhuo family was destroyed, no one could force him, but he still left Tanya Hage to protect Zhuo Zhaoyan, doing everything he could to avenge the Zhuo family, giving up his freedom, even his life. But he didn't want to act like a loyal dog. He had his pride. You're away. Shenlang stepped forward and clapped him on the shoulder. You saved Tianheng's life before, so I owed you a favor. But then you tried to assassinate my father-in-law, so I punched you. Have you ever slept with Zhuo Zhaoyan? What a random question. Coutiuan shook his head. No. That's good, Shenlang said. Let me tell you, that woman's parts are probably poisonous. If you had really slept with her, your crotch might have rotted off. Coutiuan was dazed. This was the legendary Shenlang, a near demon. Why was he such a gossip? What do you want me to do? Coutiuan asked directly. From now on, let's all eat from the same pot. Is that okay? Shenlang asked. Coutiuan nodded. Okay. This is His 5th Highness, Ning Jen, Shenlang said. Coutiuan clasped his hands. Greetings, your 5th Highness. Ning Jen, in return, was even more humble, bowing a full 90 degrees. Greetings, Brother Juo. Instantly, Coutiuan bowed again. Greetings, Your Fifth Highness. Greetings, young Master Shen. He was that kind of person. He might act arrogant at first, but if others treated him with courtesy, he would repay it tenfold. Shenlang said, Zhuo Yichen, are you willing to become a chiliarch in the fifth prince's household? Zhuo Yichen was a legend in the Yu Kingdom, a martial arts champion at 18. If he had followed a normal career path in the military, he would now be at least a fourth-rank general, perhaps even higher. A chiliarch was a minuscule rank for him. Coutiuan said. Shenlang then asked, Brother Juo, are you willing to join me in helping the fifth prince ascend the throne and achieve great things? Coutiuan was shocked. The fifth prince competing for the throne. How was that possible? It seemed like an impossible task even if they risked their lives. But Shenlang had given him a new life. He would have to repay that with his own. Instantly, Coutiuan dropped to one knee. Your subject, Zhuo Yichen, greets my lord. As long as my lord does not fail his subject will never fail his lord. This was Coutiuan's promise. Once he pledged allegiance, it was for life. Unless the person he served betrayed him, he would never betray them. Congratulations, Your Highness, Shenlang said. You have gained an invincible commander. What is an invincible commander? Big idiot. No, he is an invincible vanguard. Yelher. If that person is too powerful, let's not consider him for now. An invincible commander isn't defined by how many military treatises they have memorized or how brilliant they are. Gu Yu was formidable, incredibly so, but he could only be considered a scholar general. An invincible commander is someone like Hun Xin or Huo Kuobing. Such individuals can not only command from a central position but can also charge into battle and kill the enemy themselves. This type of commander seems to possess a kind of innate talent, a sharp instinct. They are born for the battlefield. They are born with the ability to inspire morale, to train soldiers, to sniff out the enemy's location, and to sense their weaknesses. And the most terrifying thing is, people like this don't even need to level up. Did the champion Marquis, Huo Kuobing, need to level up? Not at all. After a short period of study under his uncle, Wei Ding, the 17-year-old Huo Kuobing led 800 cavalry deep into enemy territory and killed over 2,000 Shumnu soldiers, including the Khan's own grandfather and uncle, along with a host of other dignitaries. At 19, Huo Kuobing was appointed general of the flying cavalry and led a grand army to attack the Haxi corridor, annihilating 40,000 enemy troops and capturing over 100 high-ranking individuals, including the Shumnu king, the queen mother, the Khan's wife, princes, prime ministers, and generals, achieving a world-shaking victory. He was only 19 years old. Coutiuan, Zhuo Yichen, might be just this kind of genius. From a young age, he studied martial arts, battlefield tactics, and military strategy with the Zhuo family. At 18, he became the martial arts champion. At 19, he went to Tanya Hage to study personal martial arts, literature, mathematics, and philosophy. After becoming the thief Coutiuan, he led a force of over 200 men, rampaging through the eastern part of the Yu Kingdom, and the southeastern part of the Wu Kingdom, coming and going without a trace. The government forces of the Yu Kingdom, under the Governor-General of Tianan Province, couldn't even properly encircle him. Meanwhile, in Tianbi Province and the southern part of the Wu Kingdom, the government launched over a dozen campaigns to capture him, at one point deploying 60 to 70,000 troops, yet failed to catch a single hair. His 200 cavalrymen moved between the Wu and Yu kingdoms as if it were their own backyard. Although they were labeled as thieves, he never robbed commoners or brought disaster upon the local populace, only targeting the wicked and wealthy. Furthermore, his 200 cavalrymen, despite being thieves, were highly disciplined, possessed a strong sense of honor, and, like him, scorned wealth. They were not a band of robbers, but an army with a spiritual belief, even if that belief was merely acting on behalf of heaven. Your Highness, I have 2 subordinates I wish to bring over, Coutiuan said. Of course, Ning Jen replied. And those 200 cavalrymen will all be your personal guard. I will not interfere with them. Allow me to write a letter, Coutiuan said. Young Master Shen, send someone to Dalio Island in the northeastern sea. When they see my token and the secret letter, they will come to the capital immediately. Dalio Island. Shenlang knew of the place. It was a tiny, rarely visited island, not within the maritime territory of either the Yu or Wu kingdoms. In modern Earth terms, it was in international waters. So that was Coutiuan's base. No wonder the forces of 2 kingdoms couldn't find him. When Coutiuan decided to do something, he wouldn't wait a single minute. He began to write the secret letter. Shenlang couldn't recognize a single character. It was a very strange script, one that didn't exist in this world. Did you invent this script yourself? Shenlang asked. To make a fool of myself before the world. Yes, Coutiuan replied. He had actually invented it himself. That was impressive. Our secret letters not only use a self-created script for communication, Coutiuan continued, but these characters are merely symbols. After receiving the letter, it must still be decrypted. Shenlang and Ning Jen were astonished. This was a national-level security method. You're just a band of 200 robbers. Was it necessary to be so extra? It was like using a butcher's cleaver to kill a chicken. I heard from scholar Zheng Yuyin that you were a poor student, right? Shenlang asked. Coutiuan sighed. I went to Tanya Hage when I was 19, but I had never studied literature or mathematics before. As soon as I arrived, I was forced to study alongside other 18 and 19-year-olds. So that was it. That was truly tragic. It was like throwing someone who had never attended elementary school directly into university, and into the senior year at that. No wonder Coutiuan was beaten and scolded. Every day, to the point of questioning his own existence. Yet, he actually managed to learn, which showed just how high his aptitude was. Your Highness, Coutiuan continued, do we only have the establishment for one chiliarch? For now, yes, only one chiliarch, Shenlang said. Then where are my 10 centurions? Coutiuan asked. Shenlang jutted his chin towards the 10 beggars lying haphazardly in the courtyard, bragging. In that instant, Coutiuan felt his scalp tighten and a chill run down his spine. It was clearly a warm late autumn day, but the air suddenly felt freezing. These 10 beggars? Coutiuan asked. Young Master Shen, a genius like you shouldn't have such a peculiar hobby, should you? Do you enjoy raising everything to hell-level difficulty? If there are no challenges, must you create them? These 10 beggars are completely beyond saving. You could blindly grab someone off the street, and they would still be stronger than these 10. This is just too absurd. It wasn't just that these 10 were half-crippled. The key was that they had been vagrants for too long. Their minds had become lazy, and their entire beings were practically useless. Just now, when they were practicing archery, the bow was less than 30 pounds, and they couldn't even draw it. And they practiced for less than 15 minutes before needing to rest for 2 hours. If you're going to rest, then rest. You could stand, or at the very least sit, but this group was lying completely sprawled on the ground. When faced with Shenlang and Ning Jen, they showed no fear, completely ignoring them and continuing to brag their heads off. And look at what they were doing now. One was picking his foot and then sniffing his hand under his nose, even lamenting that since he'd been bathing so much recently, the years of accumulated scent were gone. Another was holding in a fart for as long as he could before releasing it suddenly, then sighing in regret, failed again. I've been eating too clean lately, it doesn't even smell like shit anymore. This group could no longer be described as useless, they were, frankly, trash. Young Master Shen, Coutiuan said, what is your goal for these 10 men? The martial examination is in 38 days, Shenlang said. I hope they all pass. In an instant, Coutiuan was so horrified his scalp felt like it was about to peel off his skull. After a long moment, his voice trembling, Coutiuan said, Young Master Shen, why don't you just give me a dose of poison? I'll return my life to you, how about that? The debt of saving my life must be repaid, but this task. Even if you behead me 100 times, I cannot do it. If you tell me to lead troops into battle, even without swords, I should at least have a wooden club. But what am I supposed to do when you give me 10 piles of shit? Shenlang said, Brother Juo, observe each of them carefully. See if you can discover anything. Coutiuan stepped forward and meticulously examined each beggar. The 10 of them immediately stopped bragging, unnerved by Coutiuan's gaze. What are you looking at? Even at my poorest and most desperate, I never sold my ass. Now that I'm a centurion, I certainly won't sell it. Coutiuan didn't just look, he touched, squeezed, and even sniffed them with his nose. The 10 beggars were terrified. What is this? What are you trying to do? Keep your hands to yourself, it's broad daylight. Even if you want to do something, at least wait until dark. One beggar struggled fiercely, trying to keep Coutiuan's hands off him. Smack, Coutiuan slapped him. The beggar was sent flying, landing on the ground unable to move, twitching like a frog. After about 15 minutes of observation, Coutiuan returned to Shenlang. Did you see it? Shenlang asked. Coutiuan nodded. He saw it. He smelled a familiar scent on them. This kind of bloodline power is incredibly subtle and mysterious. I can only sense a tiny bit of it. Then you also know why they became like this, why each of their bodies is twisted and deformed, Shenlang said. Their bloodline power is exceptionally strong, Coutiuan explained. It naturally absorbs the vital energy of heaven and earth every day. But they don't know how to activate or release it, which has led to a backlash, causing their bodies to become misshapen. I have encountered this before. If it can successfully activate the bloodline within their bodies, and even elevate it a step further, Shenlang said, what would be the result? Each of them is nearly 30 years old. Their bloodlines have been absorbing vital energy for at least 20-some years. As long as it can be smoothly activated, they will instantly possess immense strength and vitality, just like Big Idiot. He doesn't practice martial arts regularly, he only blocks swords every day, and yet, isn't he powerful? On the battlefield, his might even surpasses that of Sword King Li Tangyu. In a one-on-one fight, he can hold off 99 of all masters. Why? Because Grandmaster Jon Chong stimulated the full power of the golden bloodline within Big Idiot's body. This power had existed in Big Idiot for over a decade, it just hadn't been guided. Once stimulated, it becomes incredibly potent. These 10 beggars have accumulated 20 to 30 years of bloodline energy. Once activated, while they may not be as formidable as Big Idiot, they will be absolutely astonishing. Shenlang said, "There are many eyes and ears around the capital. Tomorrow, I will take them out of the city to a remote, uninhabited place to activate their bloodlines and then train them in secret." Suddenly, Coutiuan spoke. "Young Master Shen, I agree to leave the city for a remote location. But can the activation of their bloodlines be delayed for 2 days? Hearing this, Shenlang was surprised. Why? Once their bloodlines are activated, Coutiuan explained, they will become normal people, and powerful normal people at that. Their mindset will completely change. A person's suffering is a precious thing. Right now, they are cripples. Don't be fooled by their daily cheerfulness, in their hearts, they are frozen in despair. I want to use these 2 days, while they are still in despair, to train their discipline. Only then will it be carved into their bones. How will you train them?" Shenlang asked. "Beat them," Coutiuan said. "Beat them half to death." Coutiuan turned and went into the room, finding a whip which he hid in his sleeve. He walked out into the courtyard, and clasped his hands in salute to the 10 beggars. "Brothers, am Coutiuan. From now on, I will be your chiliarch. We will all eat from the same pot. I ask for my brother's guidance." The 10 beggars lying on the ground were a little impatient, but they still casually clasped their hands. Of course. We will definitely guide you. Although you are the chiliarch, without us brothers to help, you won't be able to do your job. So you better be good from now on." Right, there's a pecking order. Even though you're the chiliarch, you came later. Your resume isn't as deep as ours. Little Ku, do you know what the most important thing about being an official is? First, you have to learn how to be a person. Coutiuan smiled. Of course. I will remember all of my brother's teachings. Then, his face turned cold. He pulled the whip from his sleeve and charged, furiously lashing out at the 10 beggars. Whack, get up, all of you, get up for me, he roared, lashing them madly. The pain was enough to make them piss and shit themselves. In an instant, the 10 beggars were jolted from their stupor, each one wailing like a ghost. But Coutiuan's strategy was simple, whoever cried the loudest, he would focus on beating that one, beating him until he was rolling on the ground, literally beating the shit and piss out of him. The 10 beggars first cried, then cursed, then tattled. "Young Master Shen, save us, your 5th Highness, save us, he's killing us, we quit, disband. Hearing this, Coutiuan's eyes locked onto the one who had just demanded to disband. "You said disband." His gaze was like a bite. The beggar trembled, his voice shaking. "We came here to be officials, not to be tortured. The 5th Prince and young Master Shen never controlled us. You're just a chiliarch, what do you think you are? You said you want to disband." Coutiuan's voice was ice cold. The beggar shuddered. What's with the power trip? A new official throwing his weight around. We beggars have seen this script plenty of times. You think you can scare us? You said you want to disband. Coutiuan's voice grew colder and colder, the killing intent in his eyes deepening. The beggar was scared witless, but these men were ruffians who had nothing left to lose. No matter what, they couldn't lose face. Hearing Coutiuan press him, he retorted coldly, "That's right, disband." "So what? You said you want to disband." Coutiuan's voice was flat. "That makes you a deserter. According to military law, deserters are to be hanged." Without another word, he found a rope, threw it over a tree branch, and tied a noose. Then, he grabbed the beggar by the collar and slipped the noose over his head. "If you become a deserter, you are no longer a brother. When you get to hell, don't blame me." Coutiuan kicked the stool away. The beggar's body immediately went limp, hanging in midair. From beginning to end, Coutiuan showed no hesitation. He said he would hang him, and he did. The beggar struggled desperately, his face turning purple, his tongue lolling out. The other 9 beggars were completely stunned, their souls practically leaving their bodies. This was the king of hell. He killed just like that. He said hang, and he hangs. You dare to kill someone. Brothers, we'll fight him to the death. These 10 beggars had been together day and night and were naturally full of camaraderie. They couldn't bear to lose one of their own. The remaining 9 immediately rushed forward to save the one being hanged. But Coutiuan blocked their path. The 9 of them charged at him, intending to take him down with them. But with a single kick, Coutiuan sent all of them flying. They each flew more than 10 meters, slamming hard against the wall, spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Their heads hit the corners of the wall, and fresh blood poured out. Meanwhile, the beggar who was being hanged was struggling desperately, struggling. Then the intensity of his struggles grew weaker and weaker. His tongue hung out long, his eyes were bloodshot, and he had soiled himself. Ning Jen couldn't bear it and stepped forward. General Ko, it's his first offense. Please spare his life. The other 9 beggars immediately knelt on the ground, crying, That's right, General, please spare our brother's life. Military law is without sentiment. Coutiuan said coldly. Ning Jen bowed lower. I brought them here. I failed to educate them beforehand, which is why they spoke of disbanding. The saying goes, to punish without teaching is tyranny. We cannot kill without first teaching. Your Highness, Coutiuan said, if one joins the army, one must understand military law. One cannot be excused for not being taught or not having learned. If I am the Chiliarch, then the training of soldiers is my responsibility. Your Highness, even as the Lord, should not interfere too much. Yes, Ning Jen said, bowing even lower. General Ku, all of this is within your authority. But I failed to teach them, so I am also at fault. Shenlang spoke up. General Ku, how about this? His Highness will offer his hair as a substitute to spare this centurion's life. Is that acceptable? Without a second word, Ning Jen drew a dagger and cut off his long hair. It wasn't like Cao cutting a symbolic lock, he cut off all of it, leaving only a short crop. At this point, the beggar hanging from the tree was motionless, as if dead. Coutiuan went forward and took the man down. He listened for a heartbeat, there was none. Breathing, there was none. Quick, perform per, Shenlang said, then instructed Coutiuan on the method. Without hesitation, Coutiuan began to perform on the beggar, pressing on his chest. The man's mouth was full of saliva, his tongue was hanging out, and his breath was foul, but Coutiuan acted as if he didn't notice, continuously giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and chest compressions. After about 10 minutes, the man finally resumed breathing and his heart started beating again. The other 9 beggars collapsed to the ground, crying with relief. He was actually alive, he was clearly dead, but he was saved, it was a miracle. After saving the beggar, Coutiuan's face turned cold again. He enunciated each word. This time, His Highness Ning Jen used his hair to save a life. But His Highness only has one head of hair. Do you want His Highness to offer his head to save you next time? This is the one and only time. Do it again, and you will be killed without mercy. Do you hear me? Yes, the 9 beggars responded crisply. Now, Coutiuan commanded, all of you, stand at attention for me. You will hold this position for 1 hour without moving. Even if you fall, you will immediately get back up. If anyone moves, do not blame my whip for being merciless. I am a cruel man. If you are willing to die, I am willing to bury you. Anyone who disobeys, I will either beat you until you obey, or beat you to death. The 9 remaining beggars stood there crookedly, not daring to move. But how could they endure it? In less than a few minutes, they started to fidget. Coutiuan charged forward, the whip in his hand lashing out madly. The way he struck, it was clear he was beating to kill. One beggar nearby was shaking violently, about to piss himself. He wanted to raise his hand to ask for a bathroom break. Coutiuan suddenly turned, his eyes like lightning flashing towards him. The beggar shuddered and no longer needed to go to the toilet, because he had already wet himself. Coutiuan didn't care at all, just continued to watch him. You can piss yourself for all I care, but you cannot move. Although the martial examination was drawing closer and closer, and logically they should be racing against time to activate the beggar's bloodlines, Coutiuan was in no hurry, so Shenlang naturally couldn't be either. In the 5th Prince's estate, everyone had to respect Coutiuan's absolute authority in military and martial arts matters. Once he made a decision, no one could question or veto it. Use those you trust, and trust those you use. Give him money if he wants money, give him whatever he needs. Ning Jen had no money, and Shenlang had no money either. But the Heavenly Tao Society did. After Ning Jen decided to compete for the throne, the Heavenly Tao Society immediately established a dedicated office in the capital. This office had only one responsibility, to pay. Whatever money Shenlang wanted, they gave. As long as Shenlang wrote a letter by hand, they would release the funds upon seeing it. And it wasn't just money, but any resources. The Heavenly Tao Society didn't believe Ning Jen could win the throne, but they believed in Shenlang. If Shenlang said to invest, they invested. Because from the very beginning, Shenlang had created a series of miracles, which the Heavenly Tao Society, as a strategic ally, had seen more clearly than anyone, even clearer than Jon Chong. Furthermore, if by some chance Ning Jen did succeed, the entire trade rights of the Yu Kingdom would change hands in an instant. The Heavenly Tao Society could directly turn the tables and place the hidden faction beneath them. In fact, the Heavenly Tao Society had already begun to settle accounts, trying to figure out exactly how much the Yu Kingdom's national treasury owed the hidden faction. If Ning Jen ascended the throne and wanted to suppress the hidden faction, The Heavenly Tao Society had to be ready to take over this debt at any time. What did take over this debt mean? It meant first paying this sum into the Yu Kingdom's treasury, and then it would become a debt owed by the Yu Kingdom to the Heavenly Tao Society. After calculating this debt, the Heavenly Tao Society's expression changed. Ing Yuangshan, are you really going bankrupt? You owe so much money, can you even sleep at night? So the Heavenly Tao Society established an organization with only one function, to accumulate funds, ready at any moment to take over the Yu Kingdom's debt to the hidden faction. This debt was truly enormous. The Heavenly Tao Society was also in a period of aggressive expansion, a time of strategic conquest that required vast amounts of gold. So to come up with this sum, even with the strength of the Heavenly Tao Society, they had to save up bit by bit over many years. But for now, Ning Jen's bid for the throne had just begun, and not much money was needed. For example, this time Shenlang had requested 20,000 mile horses, which was only 20,000 taels of gold. The Heavenly Tao Society, without a second word, delivered 25 magnificent 1,000-mile steeds to Ning Jen's estate within a few days. After 5 days of brutal training, the 10 beggars were completely transformed. They were absolutely disciplined. Even though their bodies were twisted and crippled, and they stood crookedly, each one could stand motionless for 2 hours without fidgeting. Furthermore, as soon as Coutiuan gave an order, they would do anything. If he ordered them to fall, even if there was a pile of shit in front of them that would smear their faces, they would fall. If he ordered them to stand still, they would not move an inch, even if a snake was crawling into their clothes. And when they slept, they absolutely did not dare to say a word, because if they did, their mouths would be immediately sewn shut. That's right, sewn shut with a needle and thread for 3 days. For those 3 days, they could only drink liquid food through a tube so they wouldn't starve. Coutiuan's method of training was so vicious that even Shenlang's hair stood on end. When the 10 beggars saw Coutiuan, it was truly like seeing the king of hell, like seeing a demon. Even their nightmares featured only him. Shenlang had once secretly spoken to Coutiuan. Brother Jiu, when training soldiers, don't you usually use a carrot and stick approach? You want people to have a mix of reverence and fear. But right now, these men fear you like a ghost and also hate you to the bone. This was Shenlang's doubt, not a question. Coutiuan replied, young master, the so-called carrot and stick approach requires going through life and death together on the battlefield to forge a true bond. Normally, just giving away clothes and sharing food can only buy simple loyalty, which is not deep or impactful enough. For now, having them fear me like this is sufficient. Whatever you say, Shenlang said. So what's the progress now? They are now disciplined, Coutiuan said. We can leave the capital and go to a remote, secret location for training. We can also activate their bloodlines. The next day, Shenlang, Coutiuan, and Wu Lai led 100-strong female guards, along with the 10 beggars, out of the Marquis of Changping's estate and out of the capital. Coutiuan wore a silver mask. The citizens of the capital once again witnessed a bizarre scene. 25 magnificent steeds, the kind of 1,000-mile horses that made people drool, were being ridden by the 10 beggars in the most unsightly way imaginable. Because they weren't riding on top of them, but were tied to the horses' backs. These men didn't know how to ride, and with their twisted, crippled bodies, they couldn't ride properly anyway. They could only be tied on with ropes. As the horses galloped, these beggars should have been screaming their heads off, but the thought of the terrifying Coutiuan made them clamp their mouths shut. Even if they were so scared they shit and pissed themselves, they absolutely would not make a sound, otherwise their mouths would be sewn shut, or worse. But then Coutiuan gave an order, you may scream. And so, the 10 beggars let out continuous, tragic screams. Giddy up, off, help, help, I'm going to fall, I'm falling. On Xuanmu Avenue, countless citizens stopped to watch the spectacle. It was too absurd, too comical. The martial examination is only about a month away, and you, Shenlang, are only now starting to train these men to ride. Isn't that a bit late? And this is how you train them. Tying them to the horses like rice dumplings. This is a real eye-opener. This year is full of clowns, but none can top you, Shenlang. Such fine horses. What a waste for them to be ridden by a bunch of good-for-nothings. In short, the scene of Shenlang leading his men out of the city was almost too pathetic and wretched to watch. With these 10 pieces of trash, you still want to participate in the martial examination in a month. You're simply insane. Forget a month, even 10 years wouldn't be enough. With this bunch of dregs, you want to conduct secret training. Then, the court censors, who had been quiet for a bit, once again submitted memorials, imploring the emperor to revoke the status of these men as civil and martial Imperial college students, to strip them of their qualifications to participate in the special examination, and once again demanding that Shenlang apologize to the world and kneel before the sage temple for 3 days and 3 nights. The emperor saw this scene of the 10 beggars tied to horseback leaving the city. He watched from the highest point of the Imperial palace, and his whole body trembled with rage. What a disgrace, utterly shameless. Why must you, Shenlang, do such foolish things and cause me, Ning Jen, to lose face. It took all his self-control not to send men out to chop these 10 beggars to pieces. The next few days of court sessions would not be peaceful. These censors would curse him every day, and Ning Jen could only continue to play dumb, pretending nothing had happened. But in his heart, he swore an oath. When the special examination was over, and all 11 beggars found by Shenlang failed, he would definitely order them to be sliced into a dozen pieces to vent his hatred. The secret location Shenlang found was over 100 miles from the capital. It was a large lake with a small island in the middle, upon which stood an abandoned manor. This manor was also provided by the Heavenly Tao Society. It was absolutely secure for secret training, because the manor was surrounded by walls, and beyond that was the lake. No one could spy on them. Of course, Shenlang might have been overthinking it. With these 10 dregs, what ghost would bother to spy on your secret training? That would be as ridiculous as the Somali national football team worrying about the Brazilian team spying on their training. If you want us to spy on your tactics, you at least have to make it to the World Cup. The Somali team doesn't even participate in the African Cup of Nations. In an underground chamber in the manor on the island, the 10 beggars lay anxiously. They were lying neatly on stone beds, and their entire bodies were tied down tightly. Next, Shenlang was going to inject them with the golden bloodline goo insects to activate their bloodline power, and even modify and upgrade their bloodline level. He had succeeded before with Coutiuan, but could he succeed with these 10 beggars? There was no confidence, no certainty. But he could only succeed. He could not fail. If he failed, everything would go down the drain. The special examination in over a month would be missed. The so-called 5th prince's bid for the throne would become a complete joke. The bet between Shenlang and the emperor would be a total loss. Boo. Shenlang let out a long breath and prepared to begin. Coutiuan said in a cold voice, "Next, no matter what happens, no one is allowed to make a sound. Otherwise, your tongues will be cut out." The 10 beggars immediately clenched their teeth and buttocks, not daring to make the slightest sound. This king of hell, Ko, meant what he said. If he said he would cut out their tongues, he absolutely would. Shenlang took out 10 syringes. Each syringe contained only about 1 ml of the golden bloodline goo insect solution. It was time to begin. Shenlang's movements were swift. Step by step, he administered the injections. In a short 2 minutes, it was all done. 1 ml of the golden bloodline goo insects was injected into the bodies of the 10 beggars. Then, there was complete silence. Immediately after, the sound of heartbeats, like war drums, filled the chamber. Their heart rates had at least doubled or trebled, and they were incredibly loud. In this underground room, the sound of their heartbeats was truly like the beating of drums. Then, whoosh, 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 each of them began to spit blood. Fresh blood shot out of their mouths like fountains. Then, the skin all over their bodies began to crack, and fresh blood poured out unceasingly. "You may scream," Coutiuan ordered. Instantly, the underground chamber was filled with miserable, heart-wrenching screams that would make one's hair stand on end. Then, Shenlang witnessed a terrifying scene. The twisted bodies of the beggars were visibly being pulled straight. Not only that, but their blood vessels began to bulge, as if they could explode at any moment. Boundless, endless pain. Snap, 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 the ropes binding them began to break, one after another. Succeed or die trying. Either he would have 10 corpses, or he would have 10 super warriors, creating an unprecedented miracle that would blow everyone's minds. In the previous part, Shenlang took the 10 beggars away to transform their bloodlines. These 10 beggars would swear that in those 2 days and 2 nights, the pain and torment they endured surpassed the sum of their entire lives. Nearly every minute, every second, they were immersed in a hellish agony, and it seemed as if there would be no end. The pain erupted from their bone marrow, from within their blood vessels. It was completely irresistible and impossible to suppress. It was truly enough to make one's soul scatter. There was a genuine feeling as if their bodies were being broken down and reassembled. They truly wished they could die immediately, or at least pass out, but it was no use. The pain continued to surge like a landslide. Shenlang also witnessed an unprecedented scene, a scene that defied modern science and medicine. The 10 twisted, crippled bodies of the beggars were literally stretched and straightened out, transforming from grotesque shapes into the forms of normal people. This couldn't help but remind Shenlang of Fat Tocho and Thin Tocho from the Deer, and the Cauldron, who was originally tall was forcibly compressed into a short, fat man, and one who was short was stretched out like a bamboo pole. He only stayed in the underground chamber for half an hour before leaving, because the screams were simply too horrific. And these 10 men screamed like that for 2 full days and 2 nights. While Shenlang was transforming the bloodlines of the 10 beggars, Lanfenzi, for the first time, was not flirting with Han or reading novels. Instead, he picked up a Buddhist scripture and read it carefully. The wretched look on his face had faded considerably, and his eyes held a more complex expression. "Lanfenzi," Shenlang said, "it seems you can't bear to witness this scene." "How could I dare?" Lanfenzi replied. In truth, he was a little reluctant to see it. It had taken him over a decade to finally find this group of wandering companions. But after finding them, he didn't know what to do. In his heart, he still wanted to hide, but for how long, he had no idea, no answer. When the great catastrophe happened, he was still too young and had no sense of mission in his heart. He just wanted to find his childhood friends and then protect them. His coming to Ning Jen's estate was mainly to find a place for his brothers to stay. But to have his talents suddenly exposed like this, he really wasn't mentally prepared. Do you remember things from your childhood? Shenlang asked. As for our childhood, Lanfenzi replied, we don't really have any memories of it. We grew up on a mountain, living a carefree life. Carefree? Shenlang asked. Yes, carefree, Lanfenzi said. We played to our heart's content. Of course, we also studied there, but it was learning through play and playing through learning. Where were your parents? Shenlang asked. Our parents were also on the mountain, Lanfenzi said. Some taught martial arts, some sewed, cooked, and farmed. Shenlang was surprised. It sounded like a utopian society. For high-minded people, it would have been truly wonderful. And then what happened? Shenlang asked. Then, the incident happened, Lanfenzi said. The adults took us and fled. We ran east, wanting to go out to sea. But after running a few hundred miles, we were repeatedly pursued and attacked. Who was pursuing you? Shenlang asked. I don't know, Lanfenzi replied. They were all top-tier martial arts masters. And then, the parents, to protect us, went out to fight the enemy. Our blind uncle took us and fled. We kept running and hiding, and kept being chased. Moreover, there were soldiers and chaos everywhere, refugees wandering all over. And so, we were completely separated. And then you spent over 10 years finding them. Shenlang asked. There were over 30 of us in total, Lanfenzi said, but I only found 10. I couldn't find the rest. Were you the oldest child at the time? Shenlang asked. Lanfenzi shook his head. No. Big brother Lanmao was the oldest. He was 13 that year. There was also big sister Lanmei. But I couldn't find either of them. So I became the oldest, and I have a duty to protect these younger brothers. Shenlang closed his eyes and thought. Coutiuan, Lanbao. They were also war refugees with exceptionally special bloodlines. Are they your brothers? Lanfenzi shook his head. No. What about Big Idiot? Shenlang asked. Even less so, Lanfenzi replied. At this point, Shenlang's research into martial arts and bloodlines had become very deep. The more he understood, the more shocked he was. The golden bloodlines of Big Idiot and Yaoer were absolutely unique, peerless in the world. Coutiuan and the divine maiden Shu Yan had very high bloodline talent, but there was still a great distance between them and Big Idiot and Yaoer. The bloodlines of Big Idiot and Yaoer were truly on a level that looked down upon all living beings. These 10 are all like younger brothers to you, right? Shenlang said. Lanfenzi nodded. Don't you want to see them become prominent? Shenlang asked. It's too dangerous, Lanfenzi said. The fatal danger from the bloodline has passed, Shenlang said. Lanbao, Shu Yichin, they are all safe and sound. Tanya Hage has guaranteed the safety of you people with extremely high bloodline talent. You can comfortably achieve great things. Then Shenlang continued. Is Han Yu also one of your members? Lanfenzi shook his head. No. Then why do you stare at her? Shenlang asked. We were homeless from a young age, wandering aimlessly. We instinctively want to find our own kind, to huddle together for warmth. Han Yu has a tragic past like mine. Only our hearts can be close together. Just then, Han Yu stormed in, pointed a finger at Lanfenzi, and said, Young master, this later scoundrel was peeking at me while I was bathing. No, Miss Han Yu, Lanfenzi said, I wasn't peeking at you bathing at all. I just had to memorize your current appearance, because every day from now on, you will become more and more beautiful. So, your appearance each day is worth commemorating. Such smooth talking, such sweet words, spoken with extreme fluency. But it was useless. Without another word, Han Yu charged forward, grabbed him, slammed him to the ground, picked up a small bamboo stick, and started whipping Lanfenzi's pants. Lanfenzi let out a miserable scream. Shenlang felt his scalp tingle and quickly retreated. This was a messy affair. Han Yu's strikes were also remarkably precise, guaranteed to make Lanfenzi hurt like hell, but just enough not to cause permanent damage. Maintaining such control was very difficult. However, his 10 brothers were currently being tortured in a hell-like state. Lanfenzi needed to share in their suffering. 2 days and 2 nights passed. The miserable screams from the basement finally ended. The 10 beggars had fallen into a deep sleep. Wu Lai led a few female soldiers in to bathe each of them, then applied ointment, and feed them soup. They slept like that for about 50 hours before waking up one by one. As they opened their eyes, they immediately felt an unprecedented marvel. It was as if a wind was blowing through their bodies, making them feel light enough to float. This feeling of power, of health, of freedom to do as they please. With just a slight exertion of force, their entire bodies would shoot up and then land on the ground. The beggars were completely stunned. Before, their bodies were twisted and hunched over, like cripples. Forget standing. Even sitting was extremely difficult, so most of the time, they lay down. Walking was a torment to the bone, because they had no strength and their bodies were unbalanced and crooked. It was excruciatingly uncomfortable. A body of over 100 pounds felt as heavy as 1,000. Just taking a few steps felt like they were about to fall. But now, their whole bodies were light, as if they were about to fly. At this moment, Coutiuan said, "There are mirrors in front of you. Each of you, take a good look at your new appearance." The men looked up. Indeed, there were several full-length mirrors. With just one glance, they were all stunned. Where were their ugly, misshapen bodies from before? Where were their half-crippled bodies? They were all gone. Each of them had a normal, straight body, even straighter than a normal person's, like a long spear. And their faces had changed too. Before, each of their faces was more or less deformed, indescribably ugly. But now, everything was back to normal. Instantly, tears welled up in the eyes of the 10 men. At first, they held it in, then they began to wail. For over a decade, almost since they could remember, their bodies had gradually become abnormal. Then it got worse and worse, until they became completely misshapen. They thought their lives were completely ruined, without a shred of hope, destined for a life of despair and depravity. That's why they spent all their time lying on the ground, bragging, because only that kind of life was joyful, a way to avoid facing reality. But now, they had all been given new lives. Coutiuan said, "From now on, from this moment, you have been given new lives. From today on, you are no longer beggars, no longer wanderers on the streets, but centurions under the command of the 5th prince. I hope you will forever remember this moment, forever remember who gave you your new lives. From now on, if anyone dares to betray, may heaven and earth destroy them. Anyone who dares to be lazy and greedy, may heaven and earth destroy them. Anyone who is greedy and traitorous, may heaven and earth destroy them." At this moment, Shenlang and Ning Jen walked in. "Before, your bodies were not well, so you could not kneel," Coutiuan said in a cold voice. "Now that you see your lord, will you still not kneel?" Then, he knelt on one knee. "Greetings, your highness." "Greetings, young master Shen." And so, the 10 former beggars knelt down neatly. "Greetings, your highness." "Greetings, young master Shen." Shenlang looked at the 10 men carefully and spoke slowly. "Before, you were beggars, wanderers on the street, so you had no names. From today on, you are centurions under His Highness Ning Jen. In the future, you will become chiliarchs, mobile corps commanders, adjutant generals, and even governors of a region, granted titles and appointed as generals. Therefore, you must have names. Lanfenzi is your big brother, so you will all take his surname, Lan. You will be called Lan Yi, Lan Er, Lan San, all the way to Lan Shai." Ning Jen couldn't help but glance at Shenlang. Such simple names. Isn't that a bit too casual? Like naming a cat or a dog. "There's nothing wrong with it," Shenlang said. "Calling them by these names will constantly remind them that they are brothers, forever one body, and will never betray each other." Shenlang continued, "No more idle talk. There are 29 days until the special martial examination. If you pass, you will rise to the sky in a single step. His Highness Ning Jen will officially have the capital to compete for the throne. If you fail, His Majesty will have you all executed. His Highness Ning Jen's bid for the throne will become a complete joke, and I will have to return to Xuanwu City in disgrace. I hope this scene does not happen. From today on, we live and die together, share blessings and endure hardships together. General Shu, from now on, I leave everything to you." Coutiuan kowtowed. "Yes, all of you, get dressed, go out, and eat. In half an hour, training begins." The martial examination is divided into 4 events: weightlifting, moving target archery, and mounted combat. Others have to train for over 10 years to participate, but you only have 28 days. Only 28 days. If you can accomplish this, you will achieve greatness and bring glory to your ancestors. If you cannot, then you can all go die. Now go." Next, these 10 men began to train like madmen. They could no longer be called beggars. They should be called the Lan Brothers, the Lan Geniuses. Coutiuan trained the 10 men by himself, 9 hours a day. From morning till night, 12 hours, they trained for 9. The remaining time for eating, drinking, and sleeping totaled only 6 hours. It was as if he was training them to death. And the results of the training were almost too much for Shenlang to bear. Not because they were too poor, but because they were too awesome. It made a weakling like Shenlang unable to watch, and at the same time, begin to question his own existence. The martial arts world was truly unfair. Those with high talent could seemingly do whatever they wanted. It was truly terrifying. The first event of the martial examination, weightlifting. They say. 10 men didn't need to train for it at all. After Shenlang used the golden bloodline Gu insects to activate the power within their bodies, they immediately burst forth with immense strength. The very first time they lifted the weights, they far exceeded the examination's requirements. They didn't need to train for a single hour, they passed directly. Next was archery. In Shenlang's estimation, archery didn't seem to have much to do with bloodline talent. But that was completely wrong. Archery relied first on strength, second on stability, third on eyesight, and fourth on spirit. Of course, modern archery also relies on stillness and feel, but for these people with extremely high bloodline talent, these things didn't exist. First, their strength was limitless. The standard for the martial examination was a one-stone bow, but for masters, choosing a stronger bow meant greater accuracy. So, Coutiuan started their training directly with 1.5 stone bows. This was equivalent to a super strong 200-pound bow in the modern world. Very few people could draw such a bow. The bow of Henry Vai was only 180 pounds. But for bloodline powerhouses like the Lan brothers, they could draw it without much effort. After drawing the bow, they could hold it steady, without moving. Of course, holding a drawn bow for a long time without shooting would cause great damage to the bow, but that didn't matter. The Heavenly Tao Society had prepared several hundred 1.5 stone bows specifically for the Lan brothers' training. It wouldn't be a problem if one person broke 10 bows. This kind of strong bow could shoot a maximum distance of over 250 meters, but its truly effective lethal range was only about 100 meters. The distance for the moving target in the examination was 120 paces, which was about 85 meters. But Coutiuan's requirements for these 10 men were even higher. They started directly from 150 paces. How to describe their progress? It was like a sudden surge. People with ordinary bloodlines would practice shooting about 100 arrows a day, because such a strong bow consumed a great deal of physical strength. But this group would continuously draw their bows and shoot, firing about 500 arrows in half a day. These numbers were simply heaven-defying. If an ordinary person underwent such high-intensity training, their tendons and bones would probably twist, and their spine would be completely deformed. But for them, it was just a little soreness. They would soak in a medicinal bath at night, and the next day they would be full of vigor again. It was as if there was limitless power in their bodies and meridians. In the morning, they practiced archery. In the afternoon, mounted archery. For them, there was still some difficulty. But horsemanship was almost effortless for them. When their bloodlines were activated, their strength was limitless, their limbs were strong, and their senses were particularly sharp. They could quickly find the feeling of man and horse as one. In just 3 days, these men could not only ride comfortably on horseback, but they could also freely mount and dismount, and even ride backwards at a full gallop. Could horsemanship also rely on martial arts talent? By the 4th day, they didn't need their hands at all. They could easily control these 1,000-mile steeds with just their legs. With their hands free, they could easily draw their bows and shoot. Their archery progress was a bit slower, but still incredibly astonishing. On the first day, they could basically all hit the target. On the second day, they could basically all score points. On the third day, they could basically hit the bullseye. By the 10th day, their archery skills seemed to hit a plateau. Coutiuan reduced the frantic training time, and began to teach them internal cultivation. Of course, this so-called internal cultivation was all about raising their spirit, raising their state of mind to be as calm as water. After studying 2 archery manuals, their skills once again surged forward. The female soldiers under Wu Lai's command and the soldiers of the Jin family under Shenlang's command were all stunned, especially Shen Shizhen. He once again fell into a state of self-doubt. Do I even need to practice martial arts? This world is just too unfair. With bloodline talent, you can really do whatever you want. You geniuses progress so quickly, could you please consider the feelings of us with ordinary talent? Before, it was one big idiot that made him question his existence. Now, 10 geniuses had suddenly appeared. Of course, compared to big idiots' level, they were still far off. But compared to ordinary people, it was like a single horse pulling far ahead of the pack. It was like an ordinary person racing on a turtle, while someone with high talent was riding a small donkey, and this group was riding 1,000-mile steeds at a gallop. People like Big Idiot were even worse. It was like they were riding a giant eagle and flying away. With geniuses like you, we ordinary people have no way to live. The 5th prince, Ning Jen, was also completely dumbfounded. Are there so many geniuses in this world? This rate of progress is just too outrageous. Things like archery were supposed to be accumulated over 10 years, day by day, month by month. But these people's progress was visible to the naked eye. It was like watching a plant grow leaves, which is a slow and silent process that takes several days to see. Or like raising a pig, which takes at least a month or 2 to see a clear change. But these geniuses were like a time-lapse film, sped up by dozens of times or more. The leaves budded, grew, and the petals bloomed in an instant. To ordinary people, It was like they were flying. Initially, Ning Jen felt that starting from scratch and passing the martial examination in a month was a fantasy. After all, the capital's martial examination was full of masters and elites. But these so-called elites, in front of geniuses, were nothing but floating clouds. The 4 events of the martial examination, with only a month of study, originally felt as difficult as climbing to the sky, to the point where they might not even learn everything. Now, it seemed there was more than enough time. It was terrifying. This world was too crazy. Then, Ning Jen sighed in his heart. What virtues do I, Ning Jen, possess to have these 10 geniuses pledge allegiance to me? They wandered the world for over a decade, and no one noticed. But Shenlang spotted them with a single glance. In that sense, Shenlang is even more formidable. There are often 1,000-mile horses, but not often a bolol. And Shenlang activated the power within their bloodlines, which is even more heaven-defying. What virtues do I, Ning Jen, possess to have Shenlang's assistance? In his heart, he said assistance, not support. This world is too unfair, Shen Shizhen sighed, because the archery of the 10 land geniuses had already surpassed his. Not only surpassed him, but also surpassed everyone under Wu Lai's command. Ordinary people have no way to live. Why must you stare at these geniuses? Wu Lai said. You can totally compare yourself to someone else. Who should I compare myself to? Shen Shizhen asked. Compare yourself to your young master, Wu Lai said. You, Shen Shizhen, are also a top-tier genius. Ew. In his heart, Shen Shizhen agreed with both hands and feet, but he didn't dare to nod. A super weakling like his master, whose martial arts talent was simply the #1 trash in the world. You could randomly pick someone from a crowd, and you probably couldn't find someone worse than the master. Beating a good-for-nothing like the master. There was no honor in that victory. Young Master Shen's talent must have gone astray, Wu Lai said. It's all concentrated in his intelligence and handsome looks. Han Niu, at the side, nodded. That's right. Although the young master is the #1 trash in martial arts in the world, he is the #1 handsome man in the world. Wu Lai, you've seen many people, have you ever seen anyone as handsome as the young master? Wu Lai said nothing. The heir of Dream Cloud Marsh must be as handsome as the master, right? Shen Shizhen said. Han Niu shook her head. No. Dream Cloud Marsh is too wretch. Shen Shizhen thought to himself, but the master is also very wretch. Of course he only dared to think this in his heart, not daring to let half a word escape his lips. He didn't even dare to show half a point of it in his expression or eyes. Otherwise, he would really be close to death. Zhu Hongxiu, Wu Lai said. I've never seen Zhu Hongxiu, Han Niu said. Is he as handsome as the young master? Wu Lai nodded. Zhu Hongxiu is truly a peerless handsome man, and top-tier handsome men rely more on their charisma than just their looks. Suddenly Shen Shizhen said, Han Niu, you've gotten a little thinner. Han Niu's face immediately turned red. She shook her head vigorously. No, don't talk nonsense. Then she ran away in a hurry. Shen Shizhen was surprised. Why didn't she want to admit she had lost weight? She had clearly lost a lot, about 20 pounds. Time flew like an arrow, and the days passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, over 20 days had gone by. There were only 2 days left until the civil examination, and only 6 days until the martial examination. So how were the 11 Lan brothers prepared? Lanfenzi had finished memorizing all the essays and poems prepared by Shenlang 13 days ahead of schedule. He could recite them fluently. Not only that, but every day he would write 10 essays and 20 poems. It was terrifying. Such high productivity could be compared to the Qianlong Emperor. A certain Qianlong Emperor composed poems and essays without shame. Lanfenzi was also shameless, needing no inspiration at all. The essays he memorized were the immortal masterpieces of Chinese history. He used them freely, and without a trace of clumsy plagiarism. Every allusion and famous saying came to him as he wrote. In this way, if he did well, the level of Lanfenzi's essays would far surpass Shenlang's. Shenlang had lost the ability to critique his essays. 1. Because Lanfenzi wrote too well. 2. Because he wrote with abandon. Nearly every sentence could be traced back to the immortal masterpieces he had memorized. To put it bluntly, Lanfenzi's essays didn't really have a soul, they were just a perfect, peerless body. But in this world, how many essays had souls? It was just writing. In a short period of time, who could write a work that could directly touch the soul? It was like the androids in the American T-series Westworld. They were exactly like real people, and they were stunningly beautiful. If such a beauty were placed in front of you, and no one told you she was a newly replicated android, would you sleep with her or not? Lanfenzi's essays were like that. Stunningly beautiful, like those beauties on the screen. Being beautiful is enough. Being able to get it up is enough. Who cares about soul or no soul? Besides, isn't the Imperial examination a business? Ning Jen had studied for over a decade and was very knowledgeable. He had read Lanfenzi's essays and said one thing: reading 10 of them in a row feels a little dull, but reading just one is extremely brilliant. Shenlang then asked, can he get into the top 3? Ning Jen thought for a moment. I've read the top 3 essays from every examination in the capital. In terms of sheer amazement, they are far inferior to Lan Ling's. The sentences he uses are truly beautiful, and the allusions he uses are truly too precise. How could they not be precise? Every word and sentence Lanfenzi used was taken from over 1,000 immoral works, and he used them flexibly. Of course, essays and poetry are quite subjective. Unless it is a truly classic, immortal work, it won't have a fatal, killing power. But Lanfenzi had taken that path to the extreme. Therefore, while placing in the top 3 in the special examination wasn't a certainty, placing in the top 7 to 10 was still stable. Moreover, the emperor had said that as long as he placed high, it didn't have to be in the top 3. With Lanfenzi's essays and poems, getting on the list was absolutely a foregone conclusion. With such stunningly beautiful sentences and such exquisite and accurate use of ancient allusions, if he didn't place high, it would be a ghost's war. Lanfenzi's side was no problem. What about the martial arts of the 10 Lan geniuses? Was there a problem with their martial arts? Coutiuan was still frantically training these 10 geniuses. Young master, take Lanfenzi back to the capital first to participate in the examination. The martial examination is 4 days later. The 3 of us will set off for the capital tomorrow. Shenlang then asked, is their level still not enough? Young master, what do you mean by a level? Coutiuan asked. Getting on the list, passing as a martial graduate, Shenlang said. How could that be enough? Coutiuan said. I don't just want them to place high. I want them to crush everyone. I want them to shock the world. If they have such bloodline talent and still can't become martial graduates, they might as well kill themselves. You guys are awesome. You geniuses are just arrogant and proud. You can't be messed with, can't be messed with. Then, Coutiuan didn't waste another moment and continued to frantically train the 10 Lan geniuses. From horseback, 100 meters away, 10 rats were scurrying away quickly. Shoot, Coutiuan roared. If you don't hit these rats, if any of them die, I will beat you half to death. Are you trash? You've been training for a month, and you can't even hit a rat 150 paces away. If I were you, I would immediately cut my throat and kill myself. What face do you have to live in this world? What face do you have to eat the Lord's stipend? 3 of them missed, and the rats escaped. Coutiuan suddenly charged forward, the whip in his hand coming down like a torrential rain. Shame, 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 trash, trash, trash. Have you been dreaming for the past month? The lake is right there. Go jump in and kill yourselves. After saying that, Coutiuan really grabbed the 3 of them and threw them directly into the lake, holding their heads under the water for several minutes without letting them up, to let them enjoy the feeling of suffocation, to let their brains quiet down a bit. Quiet down for me. A bunch of trash. A bunch of trash. Shenlang and the others watched, their scalps tingling. Han Yu's voice trembled. Sister Wu Lai, is General Ku's training always this terrifying? According to this method, everyone under his command must have died. Because the subjects are different, Wu Lai said. These men are all geniuses, so General Coutiuan uses the standard of geniuses to demand of them, pushing them to their absolute limits. Then Wu Lai added, a few days later, at the martial examination, we will truly cause a national sensation. The next day, Shenlang took Lanfenzi and left, returning to the capital to participate in the special examination. Your Majesty, Consort Bayan, the Crown Prince, the Third Prince, and everyone in the capital, just you wait. I, Shenlang, am about to perform an even more astonishing miracle. You just wait to have your eyes blown out. And you idiots in the capital, remember your bet. If I, Shenlang, succeed, if these 11 men's names are on the golden list of the special examination, you will have to eat 10 pounds of shit. My shit pit is already prepared. When the time comes, if you don't eat, I will shove it all down your throats. In the previous section, Shenlang brought Lanfenzi to the capital to take the exam. At this very moment, Jon Chong entered the capital. This event didn't cause much of a stir among the common people, but in the official circles, it created massive waves. Compared to Shenlang's arrival in the capital, which was quiet and unnoticed, Jon Chong's entrance was a grand and glorious affair. The Crown Prince himself came to the Vermilion Bird Gate to welcome him. Jon Chong's entourage was not large, only a few dozen attendants. Crown Prince Ning Jen poured a cup of wine and presented it to Jon Chong, saying, "This cup of wine is to wash away the dust of your journey, Lord Jen." Jon Chong knelt to receive it. Had it been anyone else, they might have spilled the wine on the ground, and then, with tears streaming down their face, said, "This cup is first for the brothers resting beneath the earth." But Jon Chong did not. He accepted it and drank it in one gulp. "Lord Jon, you have endured much hardship," the Crown Prince said. "This subject dares not," Jon Chong replied. The Crown Prince gently took Jon Chong's hand. "Lord Jon, let us enter the capital." His Majesty has been waiting to see you. Then, with the Crown Prince in front and Jon Chong behind, they entered the Vermilion Bird Gate. After traveling some distance on Vermilion Bird Avenue, the Crown Prince warmly invited Jon Chong to ride in his grand carriage. But Jon Chong did not dare to overstep his bounds and chose instead to return to his own simple carriage, following behind the Crown Prince's entourage as he entered the Imperial Palace. This was the first time Jon Chong had traveled on Vermilion Bird Avenue. He was not like Shenlang, who had no regard for rules and would swagger down the center of the Grand Road every time, completely ignoring that these roads were reserved for nobles of the rank of Count and above. Of course, the governor of a commandery was also permitted to use it, but Jon Chong was more cautious and had never done so. This time, it was by the Emperor's decree that he traveled down the center of Vermilion Bird Avenue to enter the palace. Upon arriving at the palace, Jon Chong first followed a eunuch to bathe and change his clothes, then went to the Emperor's study to kneel and wait. After more than an hour, the Emperor arrived. The revered monarch stormed into the study, sat down, drank a mouthful of tea, and then slammed his hand hard on the table. He was, of course, not angry with Jon Chong. The special examination was the next day, and today, the court's censors were impeaching Shenlang as if they had gone mad. They even implicitly mocked the emperor, saying things like, "In 100 years, there has never been such an absurd matter," which was as good as saying that he, Ning Jen, was a rare, muddle-headed ruler. They said even more outrageous things, like disregarding the sages and treating the sanctity of the Imperial examinations as nothing. In short, they wanted to strip the 11 beggars under Shenlang's command of their qualifications to participate in the exam, and throw them into the dungeons of the Supreme Court. Before, they had only demanded that Shenlang kneel before the sage temple to atone for his sins, but this time they directly demanded that Shenlang himself be thrown into the Supreme Court to be punished. It was clear that people were creatures who bullied the weak, and pushed for an inch after gaining a foot. At first, the censors' impeachments were cautious, but seeing that Ning Jen did not get angry and pretended not to know, their courage grew. Not only did they demand severe punishment for Shenlang, but they also wanted the emperor to publicly admit his mistake. Ning Jen truly wanted to deal with these few censors, but the special examination was about to begin, and it was not a good time to stir up trouble. The most crucial point was that in this matter, he was indeed in the wrong and had a somewhat guilty conscience. Added to that, the negotiations with the Chu kingdom were becoming increasingly deadlocked. Ning Jen felt a storm of anger brewing inside him with no outlet. Jon Chong has arrived. You have endured much hardship. Jon Chong meticulously kowtowed. This subject dares not. How is Bei commandery now? Ning Jen asked. Very good, Jon Chong replied. Emperor Ning Jen was surprised. Jon Chong was a particularly conservative man. If he said good, then it must be exceedingly good. In fact, the situation in Bei commandery was indeed excellent. With Shenlang playing the villain first and Jon Chong playing the saint, the two of them worked together to suppress the smallpox epidemic in Bei commandery, bringing the mortality rate down to its lowest point, and completely containing the disease within the commandery, preventing it from spreading. Today, Jon Chong was a living butthead to the tens of thousands of people in Bei commandery. Consequently, the hearts of all the citizens of Bei commandery were filled with loyalty to the Yu kingdom. Not only that, after a few major battles, the bandits of Three-Eyed Evil were destroyed, the other bandits were all tricked and killed by Shenlang, the wandering soldiers from the western regions were slaughtered by Shenlang, and even the corrupt officials loyal to the Su family were eliminated by Shenlang. At this moment, Bei commandery was at its cleanest, to the point where it was said that doors were not locked at night and lost items were not picked up on the streets. In this, young Master Shenlang's contribution is the greatest, Jon Chong said. Without him, Bei commandery would not be so clean. The emperor's voice was laced with sarcasm. He took a butcher's knife and killed all the filth. How could it not be clean? Then, the emperor lifted his teacup. The negotiations with the Chu kingdom are very troublesome. More troublesome than imagined. They agreed before, but now they've gone back on their word. The king of Chu not only refuses to apologize or pay compensation, but he also refuses to return the cities he previously occupied. That is related to King Gang of Nenyu, Jon Chong said. Is the situation in the south really that bad? The emperor asked. King Gang's ambitions are not small, Jon Chong said. I implore your majesty to reconsider soon. Don't be evasive, the emperor said. Speak plainly. This subject feels that the Nenyu battlefield must be reinforced, Jon Chong said. The emperor frowned. Today, 40 to 50,000 troops were already gathered on the Nenyu battlefield. More reinforcements. However, the Wu and Yu kingdoms had already formed an alliance. Even if this alliance was false, the king of Wu was barely holding on. It was unlikely he would restart a war in the short term. Therefore, sending 20,000 troops from the northern front to Nenyu was not a major problem. How many reinforcements do you think are necessary? The emperor asked. Jon Chong thought for a moment. 150,000. Hearing this, the emperor was shocked. Was Jon Chong mad? 150,000. In the nation-tilting war between Wu and Yu back then, the total forces deployed were only around 200,000. Now, facing a small Nen kingdom, he had to send out 150,000 troops. The opponent we face in the south is not just the rebel army of King Gang, but the entire shaman tribe, Jon Chong said. We must throw everything we have at it, and win in one go. 150,000 troops might even be a little insufficient. The emperor frowned but said nothing. He knew his own situation. He truly couldn't afford a major war. He had no money. He didn't know how much the national treasury owed the hidden faction, but it was definitely a huge sum. That's why, even though he knew full well that the hidden faction was colluding with the Wu kingdom to seize the Lishu archipelago, the emperor could only pretend not to know. Last time, in response to a fatal crisis, he had borrowed over 2 million taels of gold from the hidden faction. Although he hadn't used it all yet, if he were to reinforce the Nenu battlefield with 150,000 troops as Jon Chong suggested, only heaven knew how much money that would require. Instantly, the emperor set this topic aside. You have done very well in Tangxi province. Although you were guarding Bei Commandery, you also took on the duties of the governor of Tangxi province. After Lian Yongnian's death, for these past 2 months, you have essentially been acting as the central commandant of Tangxi province as well. The emperor continued, the crown prince has recommended you for the position of central commandant of Tangxi province. Do you have any opinions on this? This position was more or less decided. Jon Chong was completely dedicated to the public good. In the whole world, no one was more suitable for this position than him. This was why Jon Chong's entry into the capital had not caused much of a stir among the common people, but had created waves in the official circles. Because a star was slowly rising. And this was not a new star. At this moment, no one could stop Jon Chong's rise. Indeed, the one who had made the first contribution in wiping out Suan's rebel army was Shenlang, but that scoundrel had thrown away this first contribution like an old shoe, not caring about it at all. Moreover, everyone could see that this troublemaker was good at harming people but not at civil administration. It wasn't that he couldn't do it, but that he had no patience for it. Therefore, the first contribution naturally fell on Jon Chong's head. Today, the crown prince and the Jiu family were backing Jon Chong, making him completely a chess piece of their faction. The central commandant of Tangxi province. Although inferior to the grand commandant of Tianbi province and the grand commandant of Tianan province, was one of the 4 major border official positions in the Yu kingdom. A few years later, upon returning to the capital and entering the Grand Secretariat to become a prime minister was a foregone conclusion. Many people could even see the future. In the Grand Secretariat, Shu Rang would be the first prime minister, and Jon Chong would be at least the 3rd prime minister. A future heavyweight. This kind of fate was truly hard to predict. A few months ago, Jon Chong was still in the dungeons of the Supreme Court, awaiting death, and with appendicitis, he should have died. But not only did he survive, he was also favored by fortune to this extent. How could this not make people sigh with emotion? Although Jon Chong had not yet returned home, his house was already as crowded as a market. Over 100 officials had come to visit, and all had brought generous gifts. Hearing the emperor's words, Jon Chong immediately prostrated himself. The position of central commandant of Tangxi province is a crucial one. This subject is incompetent and cannot take it on. Jon Chong, the emperor said, are you still going to speak such nonsense to me? Jon Chong spoke crisply. Your Majesty, if you insist that this subject must go, then this subject will naturally obey. But if your Majesty's will is not absolute, then this subject does not wish to go to Tangxi province to serve as central commandant. The emperor was surprised. He had thought Jon Chong was an official-obsessed person. The central commandant of Tangxi province was one of the 4 major border commandants. The central commandant of Tanzhong province was Ning Gai, who was a prince and didn't count. So, once Jon Chong took this position, he would become one of the 3 major border officials of the Yu kingdom. Yet, he refused. The emperor frowned. Why? This subject does not wish to be an enemy of young Master Shen, Jon Chong said. The emperor was surprised. It turned out this was the reason. He had never expected it. The crown prince had recommended Jon Chong. Once Jon Chong agreed to take the position of central commandant of Tangxi province, he would naturally become a reliable core member of the crown prince's faction. Moreover, the position of central commandant of Tangxi province could not be held by anyone who was not a core member of the crown prince's faction, because to the north of Tangxi province was the grand commandant Rong Yao, who was a core member of the 3rd prince's faction. Even for the sake of balance, the central commandant had to be someone from the crown prince's side. The emperor sneered. Shenlang is causing trouble. He's helping Ning Jen compete for the throne, but nothing has even started yet. You wouldn't have a chance to be his enemy even if you wanted to. Jon Chong prostrated himself flat on the ground and said no. More. 1 radish, 1 hole, the emperor said. If you don't want the position of central commandant of Tangxi province, there is no equivalent position for you. Yes, Jon Chong said. The emperor waved his hand. Then you may go home first. Your house is probably full of people waiting with outstretched necks. These words were actually a bit sarcastic, referring to the crowds at Jon Chong's house. Jon Chong kowtowed. This subject takes his leave. At this moment, he sighed in his heart. The fate between people truly could not be forced. Jon Chong had achieved such great merit, and although the emperor valued him, there was not the slightest hint of intimacy. But Jon Chong didn't mind. In his heart, he also hoped to maintain a certain distance from the monarch, to avoid mixing public and private affairs. This kind of fusion like Shenlang and the emperor, he truly could not learn. After leaving the palace, an old servant asked, "Master, are we going home?" Then Jon thought of his crowded house, and then thought of the scene when he had appendicitis, when his doorway was so deserted you could catch birds in a net. Even though everyone thought he was going to die, no one came to see him off. It was truly a great irony. "Don't go home. Go to His Highness Ning Jen's estate," Jon Chong said. The old servant was surprised. "Master, this will offend His Highness the Crown Prince." "If I've already decided, I need not fear offending anyone," Jon Chong said. "Young Master Shenlang has not yet returned," the old servant said. "Then I will wait for him at his house," Jon Chong said. "I hear he has many good books there." And so, Jon Chong's carriage headed for the Marquis of Changping's estate, Ning Jen's residence. From a distance, Jon Chong could see that the area outside Ning Jen's estate was bustling with people, at least 1,000 surrounding it. "What's going on?" "Young Master Shen recruited 10 beggars to be officials," the old servant explained, "and they are also participating in the special examination. So the scholars and martial students are not happy. Every day, censors impeach young Master Shen, and every day, people surround and attack His Highness Ning Jen's estate, trying to force young Master Shen to admit his guilt and send the 10 beggars to the dungeons of the Supreme Court. Go to the back door." But when they reached the back door, it was still blocked by many people. "It's Lord Jon Chong." Seeing Jon Chong, the crowd immediately became excited. "Lord Jon Chong, you are a high official of the court. Are you also here to reprimand Shenlang?" "Lord Jon Chong, you are also a man of the orthodox teachings. You must seek justice for the sages. If Shenlang is not eliminated, heaven's justice cannot be served." Jon Chong couldn't help but glance at the person. Are people really so forgetful? How many people did Shenlang kill in Tangxi province? Has this person forgotten? Jon Chong's face remained impassive as he stepped forward and knocked on the door. A strong female guard opened the door. Seeing Jon Chong, she was surprised. "Lord Jon, I have come to pay my respects to His Highness Ning Jen and young Master Shenlang," Jon Chong said. "His Highness Ning Jen and the young master are not here," the female guard said. "Then I will wait for them at their house. Is that all right?" Jon Chong asked. The female guard nodded. Of course. Then they welcomed Jon Chong into the estate. Because on the battlefield of Bai Commandery, they had also fought alongside Jon Chong and held great respect for him. They also knew he was a close friend of the young master. The scholars surrounding the outside wanted to take the opportunity to rush in. Instantly, several dozen strong female guards rushed out, shouting loudly, "Whoever dares to rush through this gate, I will crush his balls." In her hand, she held 2 hard, unshelled walnuts. With a sudden squeeze, the walnuts were completely crushed. "Do you see clearly? Are walnuts harder, or are your balls harder?" Instantly, the numerous scholars were terrified. Shenlang's entry into the capital immediately stirred up a huge storm. Countless people crowded to watch. Shenlang, with his dozens of horses, swaggered down the center of Xuanwu Avenue, completely ignoring the transgression. Of course, next to him was Ning Jen, who also had the right to travel on Xuanwu Avenue. The crowd of onlookers on both sides of the street grew larger and larger. "Shenlang, haven't you made enough of a fool of yourself? You still dare to come back? The special examination is about to begin. You didn't run back to Xuanwu City, you still dare to return to the capital." For this past month, Shenlang had not been in the capital, so many people rumored that he had run back to Xuanwu City in disgrace. "Get out, Shenlang. Where are your 10 beggars?" "Young Master Shenlang, we have a bet, you know that, right?" Someone shouted from the crowd. At first, Shenlang didn't pay attention to this matter, but he waved his hand, and the entire procession stopped. Shenlang stepped out of the carriage. "Is it the bet about eating shit?" "Yes, I heard that there are many hooligans and ruffians in the capital who want to make a bet with me," Shenlang said. "If Lanfenzi and the 10 beggars can get on the golden list, you will eat 10 pounds of shit. If they can't place high, you will spit on me." "Yes, all right," Shenlang said. "I accept this bet." "Bring it up." Wu Lai brought over a long scroll. On it was indeed written very clearly, if Lanfenzi, Lan Ye, Lan'er, and all 11 of them could get on the golden list in this special examination, the loser would eat 10 pounds of shit. Conversely, each person would spit on Shenlang. "A man is not credible without his word," Shenlang said. "Anyone who wants to bet with me can come up and sign their name, and leave their handprint." Hearing this, everyone was in an uproar. "Shenlang, you are too much. How is your behavior any different from a ruffian? There is not a shred of elegance. Ning Jen was also particularly helpless. He was an upright and conservative person and disliked deceiving others the most. And Shenlang's behavior was truly deceiving without a bottom line. But a person like Shenlang seemed to have a kind of charisma. No matter what unreasonable thing he did, it could be accepted. And at the same time, one would feel, I don't understand, but it seems very impressive. Of course this phrase, I don't understand, but it seems very impressive, was also learned from Shenlang. Shenlang suddenly produced the black and white document, and the hooligans and ruffians in the capital backed off. Scared? Don't you dare. Shenlang asked. Who doesn't dare? A bold ruffian stepped forward and signed his name. Then the second, a third, a fourth. Finally countless people swarmed up. And there were several hundred people. Is there anyone else who wants to sign? Anyone else? There were no more. At the betting and signing session, only hooligans and ruffians were present. The proper, normal people wouldn't get close to this kind of excitement. It was fine to watch, but they wouldn't dare to jump in. After getting over 1,000 signatures on the clearly written document, Shenlang returned to the Marquis of Changbing's estate, Ning Jen's residence. As soon as he arrived at the door, Ayaya, so many people. Have all the scholars and martial artists of the capital come? Shenlang is back, Shenlang is back, Shenlang, go to the sage temple and admit your guilt immediately. Shenlang, immediately send those 10 beggars to the dungeons of the Supreme Court. Shenlang, the disciples of the orthodox teachings like me cannot live under the same sky as you. 1 or 2,000 people began to crowd in, shouting to fight and kill. Shenlang, get out here and give us an explanation. Shenlang, you dare to insult the sages, letting beggars participate in the special examination with us. You are a sinner of the world. Shenlang stepped out of the carriage and shouted loudly, everyone, 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 don't surround me here. You should go to the Ministry of Rights. Go to the Bureau of Military Affairs. You should boycott the exam. You can set conditions with the Ministry of Rights and the Bureau of Military Affairs. If they don't revoke the qualifications of Lanfenzi and the other 10 to participate in the special examination, you will formally boycott the exam. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Then they thought about it. And it made a lot of sense. To protect the dignity of the sages, to maintain the sanctity of the Imperial examinations, they could exert such pressure. We can boycott the exam. There are several thousand of us, and Shenlang's side only has 10 beggars. As long as we threaten to boycott, the Ministry of Rights and the Bureau of Military Affairs will definitely compromise. Go to the Ministry of Rights. Go to the Bureau of Military Affairs. If they don't revoke the examination qualifications of the 11 beggars under Shenlang, we will immediately boycott the exam. Then, 1 or 2,000 people raised their hands and shouted, marching towards the Ministry of Rights and the Bureau of Military Affairs. Shenlang's group smoothly entered the Marquis of Changbing's estate. Lord Jon, why are you here? Seeing Jon Chong, Shenlang was delighted. My house is as crowded as a market, Jon Chong said. I dare not go back. You've come at the right time, Shenlang said. Help me look at an essay. Shenlang selected an essay and handed it over. It was a work by Lanfenzi. Jon Chong read the first paragraph and was immediately amazed. Good, a good essay. Truly marvelous, enlightening. Then he read on. An hour later, he finished reading. He then read it a second time. And a third time. How is it? Shenlang asked. This is not a work of young Master Shen, is it? Jon Chong said. How did Lord Jon know? Shenlang asked. Young Master Shen's works do not follow the rules, they are free and unrestrained. But the ideas are profound, Jon Chong said. But this essay, the tone of the opening is incredibly stunning, but towards the end, it always feels like something is missing. The entire essay has no flaws, nothing wrong. The wording and sentences are particularly amazing, and the allusions are used with precision and ingenuity. But it just lacks that little something. Jon Chong was a master of literature, so of course, he could see the shortcomings of Lanfenzi's essay at a glance. With this level of essay, can he pass the special examination this time? Shenlang asked. More than enough, Jon Chong said. He can definitely pass. This kind of essay with no mistakes, stunning sentences, and precise citations. There will be no suspense. About the result. Can he get in? Jon Chong said. He can definitely get in. Then can he get into the top 3? Shenlang asked. Jon Chong thought for a moment. There is a 60% chance of getting into the top 3. But there is absolutely no hope of coming in first. I have read many of Shu Hongbing's writings. His level is higher. Shu Hongbing, the 5th son of Shu Rang, was the #1 teenage genius in the capital, only 17 years old this year. Of course, if his grandfather and father hadn't suppressed him, he would have passed the examination a few years ago. He was truly talented beyond measure. Whether it was essays or poetry, they were all brilliant and amazing. The Jiu family could be said to be full of talents. The whole family had produced countless scholars and provincial graduates. This family had produced 3 #1 scholars in the last 100 years. One was a #1 scholar of the Great Khian Kingdom, one was a #1 scholar of the Yu Kingdom, and one was a #1 scholar of the Great Yan Empire. This family's influence spanned several countries and could be called a behemoth of the Great Yan dynasty. Placing high is a certainty, Jon Chong said, but whether he can get into the top 3 really depends on luck. Jon Chong asked again, this is a work by Lanfenzi, right? Shenlang nodded. Unimaginable, Jon Chong said. To be able to write such an article in just 1 month's time. Clearly a top-tier genius. Then Jon Chong said, where's His Highness Ning Jen? He was afraid of making things difficult for you, so he didn't come to see you, Shenlang said. According to Ning Jen, Jon Chong had come to see Shenlang, not him. Ning Jen said he wanted to compete for the throne, but Jon Chong was a high official of the Crown Prince's faction. If Ning Jen took the initiative to meet with Jon Chong, wouldn't that make the Crown Prince suspicious and make things difficult for Jon Chong? His Fifth Highness is clearly a gentleman, Jon Chong said. Then he continued, I have just refused His Majesty. I did not accept the position of Central Commandant of Tangxi Province. This has put Lord Zhang in a difficult position, Shenlang said. I'm afraid you will face a great storm next. The Crown Prince recommended Jon Chong, but he refused. This was a slap in the face. This was a betrayal of the Crown Prince's faction. How could the Crown Prince and the Jiu family tolerate it? Against a traitor, they would naturally think of every way to destroy and crush him. So, next, Jon Chong would definitely be fiercely attacked by the Crown Prince's faction and face another calamity. Last time it was imprisonment. This time, even if there was no imprisonment, his reputation would be tarnished. What specific calamity he would face would depend entirely on the Emperor's thoughts. Lord Zhang, don't worry, Shenlang said. I will speak to His Majesty on your behalf. Although His Majesty is very annoyed with me, he still listens to my words. Then I will thank young Master Shen in advance here, Jon Chong said. Shenlang smiled. Of course, my influence is too light. Duke Bian Xiao is the one whose word can settle the universe. As long as he opens his mouth, the Crown Prince's counterattack will immediately cease. Jon Chong smiled. Let's see what fate brings. In any case, once I, Jon Chong, have made a decision, I will definitely not regret it. The next day was the special examination. Over 1,000 scholars rushed to the Ministry of Rights Yemen. Over 1,000 military men rushed to the Bureau of Military Affairs. Instantly, the Ministry of Rights and the Bureau of Military Affairs were in chaos, and the crowd grew larger and larger. Revoke the examination qualifications of the beggars under Shenlang, or we will boycott the exam. Revoke the examination qualifications of the beggars under Shenlang, or we will boycott. Several thousand people shouted in unison, and the slogan became more and more unified, the sound more and more intense, echoing for several miles. Seeing this situation, the scholars and military men who were not originally participating in this special examination also joined in. They felt, we are also scholars, also martial artists, and we must also protect the sanctity of the civil and martial imperial examinations. In the end, the number of people gathered at the 2 Yemen combined exceeded 10,000. This was a super major incident. Scholars and military men together besieging the courts Yemen. And the law does not punish the masses. The Minister of Rights and the Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau of Military Affairs could not make a decision. However, these two powerful figures also disdained Shenlang's actions this time. Clearly, you, Shenlang, you beast, relying on His Majesty's favor, are letting 10 beggars participate in the special examination. You are not only humiliating the candidates of the special examination, but also slapping us in the face. The Minister of Rights was a former second-place scholar. The Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau of Military Affairs, Chang'e, was also a former second-place martial scholar. The two of them personally stepped forward to appease the scholars and military men. Rest assured, this official will go to the palace to report your thoughts to His Majesty. I believe His Majesty will definitely have a just verdict, protecting the dignity of the examination and the dignity of the sages. This official also finds this duty bound. This Minister of Rights was officially taking a stand, siding with the numerous candidates. At this, the scholars besieging the Ministry of Rights Yemen were overjoyed. The Lord is noble. Justice is in the hearts of the people. Then, the leading scholar presented a petition with 10,000 names. On it were over 10,000 signatures of scholars, as well as bloody handprints. It was a blood letter, about 1,000 words long. The content was simple. If the examination qualifications of the 11 beggars under Shenlang were not revoked, the nation would not be a nation, the sanctity of the imperial examination's prestige would be swept away, and the emperor's prestige would be swept away. Not only the scholars on this side had a 10,000 name blood letter, but the martial arts students on the other side also had one. The Minister of Rights and the Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau of Military Affairs took these 2 blood letters and entered the palace, presenting them to Emperor Ning Yuangshan. Your Majesty, Over 10,000 people have besieged the Ministry of Rights and the Bureau of Military Affairs. If we do not give these people a just verdict, I am afraid it will cause widespread unrest. If we do not give them a just verdict, I am afraid they will boycott the exam. Once several thousand people boycott the exam, it will become a scandal for the ages. Your Majesty, for the reputation of our kingdom, for the sanctity of the imperial examinations, please punish Shenlang severely. Please revoke the qualifications of the 11 candidates. You cannot fail the people, Your Majesty. Emperor Ning Yuanxian looked at these 2 long blood letters, covered with over 10,000 signatures. This was coercion. These scholars, these martial arts students, were coercing him. I, Ning Yuanxian, have just won a great victory, and out of celebration for the whole world, I opened this special examination. And you are coercing me. Originally, Ning Yuanxian was very angry at Shenlang. Every day, the censors impeached him, and he could only pretend not to know. But now, over 10,000 people were coercing him. In an instant, he became furious and immediately found a common enemy with Shenlang. All his anger was vented on these scholars. Haha, Ning Yuanxian laughed loudly. Boycott the exam. Good, take it if you like, or leave it if you don't. Issue a decree, the special examination will continue. Even if only one person comes to take it, I will accept it. Issue a decree, those who decide to boycott the exam at this time will not only be stripped of their existing titles, but will also be permanently barred from participating in the imperial examinations. Deploy the Imperial Guards. Anyone who dares to besiege the Ministry of Rights and the Bureau of Military Affairs, any troublemakers, regardless of their status or title, will all be beaten out. The foolish and deluded will all be arrested and thrown in prison. The Emperor issued a strong decree. Instantly, all the scholars, all the martial arts students, were terrified and dejectedly returned home. The next day, the special examination officially began. The matter of Jon Chong refusing the Crown Prince's recommendation and turning down the position of Central Commandant of Tianxi Province was inevitably Li. As it turns out, there are no walls in the world that the wind cannot pass through. The Crown Prince was furious. Shu Rang was shocked. He first spent 2 hours in the Crown Prince's residence, doing his utmost to persuade him, and finally managed to temporarily calm the Crown Prince down. Then, Shu Rang went to see Jon Chong himself. Why? What? Shu Rang's voice was almost trembling. Before this, he had never imagined that Jon Chong would refuse. There was absolutely no reason for it. Jon Chong had been discovered by Shu Rang and was considered a capable member of the Jiu faction. Although he had been delayed a bit before, the position of Central Commandant of Tianxi Province far exceeded Jon Chong's previous aspirations. Once in this position, he could truly be considered to have high power and authority. Jon Chong, Shu Rang said, is this because you hold a grudge that His Highness the Crown Prince did not try to save you in time back then? Jon Chong shook his head. No. He truly held no grudge against the Crown Prince. The Emperor was ruthless, and the Crown Prince was equally ruthless. He saw it very clearly. A great king is a king, and a Crown Prince is a young monarch, but a young monarch is still a monarch. As a subject, to expect a monarch to have feelings was in itself incredibly naive. Then why? Shu Rang asked. Young Master Shen saved my life, Jon Chong said. In Bei Commandery, we fought side by side. I do not wish to be his enemy. Shu Rang was instantly astonished. It was actually for that reason. You, Jon Chong, when did you become so naive? In the political arena, you still want to talk about feelings. You, Jon Chong, how ruthless were your methods before? You could even kill your own in-laws. How have you become so sentimental now? Shu Rang's voice turned cold. You, Jon Chong, are not the type of person to talk about feelings. And indeed, he was not. Especially the old Jon Chong, as sharp as a keen blade, was considered a harsh official. But a person's heart is not made of cold steel. After his son Jon Jin's death, a hole was pierced in Jon Chong's heart. After he took a trip to hell due to appendicitis and was later saved by Shenlang, and finally, after experiencing the 15-day hellish battle in Bei Commandery, his entire person had undergone a certain transformation. To use a poem by Lu Qun, heartless may not be a true hero, who says a loving father isn't a true man. The king of the jungle roars with the wind, yet looks back to affectionately nuzzle its young. After experiencing the drama of life and death, Jon Chong transformed from being as hard as cold steel to overcoming hardness with softness. His entire being had ascended to a new level. Before, he could have become a powerful official, but today, he could become a great minister of the state. A purely ruthless person cannot become a great minister. Just like Shan Yan, no matter how formidable, he could never become a pillar of the state like Xiao He, Cao Can, or Huo Guan. For 5 years, Jon Chong remained silent, offering no explanation. Shu Rang spoke slowly. You know the Crown Prince's character. Of course, Jon Chong knew. The Crown Prince's character was very similar to the Emperor's, yet also different. The Emperor carried a hint of romanticism, while the Crown Prince's disposition was much colder. Moreover, the crown prince was exceptionally arrogant, to the point of being disdainful of everyone. At crucial moments, he even dared to challenge the emperor for the sake of his own authority. For example, last time, even though he knew Shenlang had performed great meritorious service in Bei Commandery, and knew full well that the emperor was extremely fond of Shenlang, he still made the first move, sending troops to surround Shenlang at the Vermilion Bird Gate, wanting to disarm and imprison Shenlang's entire retinue. Subsequently, he mobilized the troops of the commandant's office to surround Shenlang's group. The emperor, even though he knew, just pretended not to, because it was Shenlang who had taken the initiative to refuse the crown prince's offer of peace, so he couldn't blame the crown prince for suppressing him. Just now, I spent about 2 hours persuading him, Shu Rang said. His Highness the Crown Prince is willing to give you one more chance. This position of Central Commandant of Tangxi Province, do you want it or not? Think it over clearly and answer me. Jon Chong bowed in a salute. Lord Zhuo, I have thought it through. Shu Rang was so angry his whole body trembled. He pointed at Jon Chong and said coldly, Jon Chong, you have greatly disappointed me, you know that. He was truly heartbroken. The Crown Prince had failed Jon Chong, but Shu Rang had never. All along, Shu Rang's support for Jon Chong had been almost unreserved. Even when Jon Chong was imprisoned, Shu Rang had not stopped running around for him. The key was, Jon Chong was his discovery. Of course, after Jon Chong wiped out the earldom of East River, he had also entered the emperor's sights, but it was Shu Rang's cultivation that had allowed him to take fewer detours. Jon Chong once again bowed low. My apologies, my lord. Shu Rang stared at Jon Chong for a long time. He did not issue any threats. He simply turned and left. He didn't need to threaten. Everyone knew how fierce the Crown Prince's faction's counterattack would be. A traitor was even more detestable than an enemy. Although Jon Chong didn't feel he was a traitor, in the eyes of the Crown Prince's faction, he was. They had to use thunderous methods to display their authority. Moreover, you, Jon Chong, have no solid backing. You are not like Shenlang. Behind Shenlang is the Marquisate of Xuanwu, and also the Emperor's protection. You, Jon Chong, have nothing behind you. The Crown Prince's faction was your only solid backing, but now you have discarded it. How naive, how absurd. As he reached the door, Shu Rang said one last thing. Jon Chong, take care of yourself. During the Tang dynasty, the imperial examinations were divided into the provincial and capital exams. During the Song dynasty, they were divided into the provincial, capital, and palace exams. The Yuan dynasty largely followed the Song system. In the Ming and Qing dynasties, they were divided into the provincial, metropolitan, and palace exams. In the Great Yuan dynasty, the provincial and capital exams were the same concept and could both be called the provincial exam. In the Ming dynasty, the provincial exam had about 3 rounds, each lasting 3 days. It was not an exaggeration to say it was torture. Moreover, a rule maniac like Qu Yuancheng wished he could set rules for everything, and of course, that included the imperial examinations. The 8-legged essay had its initial form in the Yuan dynasty, and during the Chenhua era of the Ming dynasty, it was officially established. From then on, the degree of freedom in the imperial examinations became extremely low, very restrictive. But in the Tang dynasty's examinations, it wasn't like that, though the difficulty was much higher. There were the Mingjing, Jinshi, Mingfa, and Daoquan examinations, and the degree of freedom was extremely high. The imperial examinations of the Great Yuan dynasty did not have the restrictive rules of the Ming and Qing dynasties of China, nor were they as free and meticulously graded as in the Tang dynasty. For example, this special civil examination was held over a total of 2.5 days. The first day was for the pasted slip classics and mathematics. The second day was for contemporary policy essays. The third day was for poetry and prose. Seeing the Imperial examinations of this world, Shenlang was very surprised. It was not as fragmented as the Tang examinations, nor as rigid as the Ming and Qing. The content was even more comprehensive than in the Ming and Qing, not dogmatic, and did not require rote memorization. This time, there were 3,000 people participating in the special civil examination in the capital. Yesterday, these people had all been saying that if Lanfenzi's qualification to participate was not revoked, they would boycott the exam. The emperor, in a rage, said, boycott if you like. As a result, that group of people got scared. Before the imperial guards were even deployed, these people had dejectedly returned home. In their hearts, they calculated, so what if Lanfenzi participates in the special examination? He'll just be disgracing himself. We have studied for over a decade and have been on the examination field countless times. You, Lanfenzi, are just a beggar. How many books could you have read? You've never polished a stool in a classroom, nor have you undergone training for the imperial examinations. We thought Shenlang would find a great scholar for you to cram with, but it turns out he didn't at all. We hear this Lanfenzi spends his days at home reading novels. With this kind of virtue, you still want to compete with us. A grave mistake. Just wait for us to crush you into dregs on the examination field, to let you know what it means to be a self-aware graduate. Then, these people went home to eat and drink well. Whether they could sleep well depended on the person. Those with a good mentality snored away. Those with a poor mentality tossed and turned. The exam was the next day. If they didn't sleep well, it wouldn't do. How could they sleep peacefully? They could drink a little wine, but not too much, lest they get drunk. If you had money, you could find a prostitute to relax a bit, but you also had to know restraint, not to exhaust your loins. If you had no money, well, you could just take care of it yourself. Lanfenzi had no money. He hesitated for a very long time, wanting to go out and relax a bit. He had already chosen the place. Less than 3 miles from the Marquis of Changping's estate was a Chunhua pavilion. Of course, as soon as you hear the name, you know it's a low-class place. But for Lanfenzi, this was already a high-class club. Before, he couldn't even afford the small stalls on the side of the road, and could only go with the fat streetwalkers. 1 silver coin a session. This price was the most Lanfenzi could afford. After hesitating for an hour, he decided not to go. Anu has already started to lose weight. If I, Lanfenzi, go to a brothel, wouldn't I be letting her down? I'll just take care of it myself. A full stomach and warm clothes. Lanfenzi leisurely opened the special edition of The Plum in the Golden Vase, Boundless Romance. The next morning, Shenlang sent Anu to see Lanfenzi off to the examination field. She didn't go. And so early, she wasn't even awake yet. But Ning Jen was up. He personally saw Lanfenzi out. My lord, you need not go further. Lanling will not disappoint my lord, Lanfenzi said with a bow. In front of Shenlang, he was always casual, but in front of Ning Jen, he was serious. Just do your best, Ning Jen said. Don't be too hard on yourself about the results. Then, Anu drove the carriage of the Marquis of Changping's estate towards the examination field. Along the way, the lanterns were like stars. Because there were about 3,000 people participating in the special civil examination. Seeing the carriage of the Marquis of Changping's estate, the crowd was as if they had found an outlet for their hatred. Inside the carriage is Lanfenzi, that rotten beggar. Instantly, someone next to him said, please don't use the word rotten on Lanfenzi. Why not? He is rotten, the person next to him said, the rotten one is Shenlang. This Lanfenzi isn't even rotten. He's just dregs, not worthy of being called human. Right, that's a good word. Dregs, not worthy of being called human. I have read all the classics and poetry, yet I have to take the exam with such dregs. Clearly, the way of heaven is unjust. It's not that the way of heaven is unjust, it's a man-made disaster. That son-in-law surnamed Shen is a scourge on the world. Why don't we go up and beat that Lanfenzi to death? After all, it's still dark. If we all do it together, and then disperse immediately, they'll never catch us. Good idea, you go first. Instantly, the eyes of the candidates of the special civil examination turned towards Lanfenzi's carriage, becoming both dangerous and crazed. It was clearly hard to resist this temptation. Now was the best chance to beat Lanfenzi to death. Several hundred people couldn't help but move closer to Lanfenzi's carriage. Then, Anu's voice came from inside. Want to come and beat Lanfenzi to death? You can. You go up, sisters. If anyone dares to come within 3 feet, crush their balls. Yes, 2 strong female guards roared. Instantly, over 100 scholars quickly scattered. Crush their balls. These past few days they had heard it too many times. Just hearing it made them feel a phantom pain in their balls. Lanfenzi was extremely moved. Anu, I know you care about me. In this life, I will never let you down. Shut up, Anu said. Say one more word, and I'll crush your balls too. Lanfenzi's heart fluttered. In his mind, he shouted, Anu, my love, come and crush them, come and crush them. Since they could no longer take the opportunity to beat Lanfenzi to death, these candidates all moved far away, as if getting close to Lanfenzi's carriage was a great humiliation. Tui, to walk the same road as this piece of trash is a great humiliation. Lan the dregs, not worthy of being called human. Shenlang the son-in-law is truly a scourge on the world. Along this road, Lanfenzi's carriage was not just isolated, it was humiliated to the point of madness. After the first person spat, nearly everyone else had to spit at Lanfenzi's carriage. And so, along the way, Lanfenzi was spat on several thousand times. At dawn, he finally arrived outside the examination field. He got out of the carriage, took a basket, and began to line up, preparing to enter. Wherever he went was like a plate. All the candidates separated. Lan the dregs, not worthy of being called human. That son-in-law surnamed Shen is truly a scourge on the world. He went to the back of a line to queue up. As a result, the people in front of him all dispersed to other places. Lanfenzi went directly from being the last person to the first. Then, the body search officially began. In short, it was a very embarrassing process, but Lanfenzi didn't care at all. He had experienced all kinds of embarrassing situations. Not only did he not feel ashamed, he even felt very excited. It was a pity the person searching him was a man, and not a woman. After the body search was completed, everyone entered the examination field one by one. After all the candidates had entered, the 4 invigilators entered, and several hundred Imperial guards entered. The entire gate of the examination field was sealed shut. The chief examiner gave a speech, a gong was struck, and the exam papers were officially distributed. The Imperial examination to commemorate the 20th anniversary of King Ning Yuanxian's ascension to the throne officially began. The exam for the first day was the pasted slip classics and mathematics. There were several pages of questions, and just looking at them was a bit like a mountain of pressure. What were the pasted slip classics? In the Tang dynasty, it was a passage from the 4 books and 5 classics with 3 characters covered up. The candidate would then write out these 3 characters. That was considered a pass. Each exam paper had thin slips, and as long as you answered 5 correctly, you pass. But the pasted slip classics of the Yu Kingdom's Imperial examinations were not so simple. It was not just filling in the blanks, but also annotating the position. But in short, it was still a matter of rote memorization. No matter how strange, it would still appear in the 4 books and 5 classics. So how many questions were there in the Yu Kingdom's pasted slip classics? Any questions? Crazy. Seeing this dense page of questions really made one feel a bit breathless. The 4 books and 5 classics combined had several 100,000 characters. Who but a pervert could memorize it all? Therefore, every time the pasted slip classics exam was considered the simplest, but also the deadliest. As the Chinese imperial examinations developed later, a specific school of thought was even formed. Some people would search for obscure and little-noticed passages in the entire canon and turn them into dozens of rhyming psalms for easy memorization. This kind of work was called a teikuo. In this way, you didn't need to memorize the entire text, just the cheat sheet. The Yu Kingdom had not yet formed such a school of thought, and the examiners were also quite normal. In the 90-question test paper, 5 parts were common and easily found passages, 3 parts were quite rare, and the last 2 parts were pervert level, located in extremely obscure corners. Especially the last 10 questions, which gave one a sense of doom. After reading these questions, nearly all the candidates would feel, what the hell is this? The 4 books and 5 classics even have this content. I don't believe it. In fact, if these examiners hadn't been setting the questions, they probably wouldn't have known this content either. If they didn't look at the book, they couldn't answer it themselves. But Lanfenzi was a complete pervert. A pervert with a photographic memory. Nearly no one could memorize the entire 4 books and 5 classics, but unfortunately for them, he had already memorized it all long ago. So, for this 90-question pasted slip classics exam, he solved it all without much effort. For the vast majority of candidates, completing this 90-question paper would take at least 3 hours, and the last 10 questions were a matter of pure luck. But Lanfenzi only used less than half an hour to finish writing it all, with 100 accuracy. Then, he began to solve the mathematics questions. What was mathematics? It seemed like mathematics, but it wasn't entirely mathematics. To explain it in modern terms, it was probably natural sciences. The questions were taken from books like the Arithmetical Classic of the Gnomon and the Circular Paths of Heaven, the 9 chapters on the mathematical art, and the Sea Island Mathematical Manual. There were 30 questions in total. In fact, Shenlang was also very surprised to see these books, because the majority of these books were not from the same period as the 4 books and 5 classics. Many of them were works from after the Han Dynasty. He never expected that here, they would become ancient classics. In the imperial examinations of the Great Yan Dynasty, mathematics was the least important subject. At least in the provincial exams, it wasn't required. Many scholars also ranked mathematics at the lowest level. After all, its weight in the final score was the lowest, but the effort required to study it was the greatest. But Lanfenzi was a pervert. His mathematical talent even surpassed Shenlang's. If not for cheating, Shenlang was really no match for him in a normal math problem. Normal addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and even quadratic equations. Lanfenzi could quickly give the answer through mental calculation. In short, this talent made Shenlang sigh in admiration. He had no idea how Lanfenzi's brain was constructed. The deadliest of these 30 mathematics questions were the last 3. Most candidates couldn't even understand the questions, let alone solve them. So, according to old practice, most smart candidates would choose to give up on these few questions. Wouldn't it be better to rest and conserve energy for the next day's exam? The second day's policy essay, and the third day's poetry and prose were the most important. But these 30 mathematics questions, Lanfenzi only used less than an hour to solve them all. Damn it, it's too simple. Lanfenzi even felt that these questions were an insult to his intelligence. Young Master Shen's questions are still more interesting, more formidable. There are many questions that Lanfenzi still can't solve to this day. So in Lanfenzi's heart, Shenlang was clearly a man of heavenly knowledge. But he didn't know that Shenlang was completely standing on the shoulders of giants. In terms of true mathematical talent, Shenlang was not as good as Lanfenzi. In this first exam session, a normal candidate would need to use the entire day, and even burn a candle at night to continue writing, holding a torch to see at night to calculate. But Lanfenzi only used less than an hour to complete it all. And he didn't even need to check it. Ah, so boring. Next, there was too much time. How to spend it. Now Lanfenzi regretted a bit. Why did he go to bed so early last night? His body was still not up to par. After masturbating twice, he became sleepy. Why don't I just continue sleeping? So, Lanfenzi gently covered his exam paper and then lay on the table, snoring away. He had been sleeping for half an hour when a deputy examiner walked past him. This is Lanfenzi, Lan the dregs, not worthy of being called human. As expected, a piece of trash. The exam has just started, and he's already sleeping. Completely unreliable. You piece of trash, why did you even come to the exam? To bring shame to Shenlang. To bring shame to Ning Jen. But these two aren't afraid of losing face. One has a face as thick as a city wall, and doesn't know what losing face is. One has no status at all and is inauspicious, so he has no face to lose. The surrounding candidates, seeing Lanfenzi sleeping, immediately sneered. This beggar is truly mud that cannot be plastered on a wall. The exam has just started, and he's already sleeping. That son-in-law surnamed Shen, the scourge of the world, will definitely lose. He'll have to wait for everyone to spit him to death. Right, when the time comes for the bet, we should add a little piss. The voices of these people were very low, completely like murmuring, but the voices of several hundred people together seemed a bit noisy. The invigilator was angry. Silence. If there's any more chatter, you will be expelled from the examination field. Then the invigilator left Lanfenzi's side, letting him snore away. After all, sleeping was not forbidden in the examination field. Not to mention sleeping, even if you had a wet dream, there was no problem. In the great dream, who is the first to awaken? He didn't know how long he had slept. Lanfenzi woke up to find the sun high in the sky. It was only noon. He had slept for so long, yet it hadn't even been 2 hours. This time was too difficult to pass. Time to start eating. After eating a delicious meat bun and dawdling for an hour, Lanfenzi really couldn't sleep anymore. He really didn't know what to do. And he couldn't doodle on the exam paper, otherwise he would be expelled. So, Lanfenzi closed his eyes and began to read Battle Through the Heavens, boundless romance in his head. He had completely memorized it. Now, it was like reading it again without seeing it. It was truly enjoyable. Luckily, I brought Battle Through the Heavens and Journey to the West in my head. Otherwise, I would have died of boredom on this examination field. Of course he also brought The Plum in the Golden Vase, boundless romance in his head, but it wasn't good to recall it in the examination field. What if he got excited and couldn't control himself? Interspersed with the exam, it wasn't good after all. Everyone else was racking their brains, racing against time. Lanfenzi was bored to death, waiting for time to pass. Finally, the first day was over. In his heart, Lanfenzi prayed, I hope tomorrow's exam is a little harder, so I can use more time and use my brain more. The second day of the special civil examination. Today's exam was the contemporary policy essay. Nowadays, the imperial examinations of the Great Yan Empire valued policy essays, so this second day's exam was the most important. To give a ratio, for example, in this special examination, the second day's policy essay accounted for 50%, the third day's poetry and prose accounted for 30%, and the first day's pasted slip classics and mathematics could only account for 20%. Only if you did well in the policy essay would you have hope for the entire exam. If you failed the policy essay, then even if you wrote flowery prose in the other two exams, it would be useless. It was precisely for this reason that for over a month, Shenlang had made Lanfenzi frantically memorize over 1,000 policy essays. The topics of the Ming and Qing dynasties were basically drawn from the 4 books and 5 classics, but the policy essays of the Great Yan dynasty were not necessarily from the 4 books and 5 classics. Sometimes they used them, sometimes they didn't. Conservative monarchs liked to draw topics from the 4 books and 5 classics, but otherwise, they didn't. Was Ning Jen a conservative monarch? Of course not. So, in recent years, the high-level examinations of the Yu Kingdom had rarely drawn topics from the 4 books and 5 classics. The key was, this Ning Jen, in order to show off his own brilliance, was worried about the examiners and liked to set the questions himself. For example, this time, for the special examination, the policy essay and poetry and prose questions for 3 of the 5 examination sites were set by the emperor himself. This was enough to drive one crazy, because this emperor's questions were usually very bold. But your majesty can be bold. We dare not write like that. We are usually timid. With a clang of a gong, the exam papers were officially distributed. Everyone eagerly looked at the topic, and then nearly everyone let out a groan. This question was not strange at all, not even difficult, but it was a bit too bold. The topic was on the feudal system of enfouffment. Your Majesty, Suan has just been annihilated. Are you in such a hurry to declare the victory of the new policy? If this question were asked in the Great Yan Empire, it would not be strange at all, because the new policy of the Great Yan Empire had come to an end. But in the Yu Kingdom, the new policy could at most be considered more than half done, and even then, it was a considerable failure. Suan was the biggest old noble. Although he was annihilated, it was not because of the new policy, but because of rebellion. The key was, the Great Yan Empire over there hadn't asked this question. Was this topic suitable for our Yu Kingdom? And as candidates, how should we grasp the measure? Because the ultimate goal of the new policy was not only to strip the old nobles of their fiefs and private armies, but also to separate civil and military administration, and to change commanderies into prefectures and cities into counties. To put it bluntly, it was a system of centralized power. Just look at what the Great Yan Empire did. Such a radical topic. We dared to discuss it in private, but to openly write it into an article, we were really a bit apprehensive. But when Lanfenzi saw this policy essay topic, his heart was filled with both joy and a groan. He groaned because he had originally wanted the topic to be a bit more difficult, so he could rack his brains and spend the whole day on it, to avoid having nothing to do. He was joyful because he knew his own level, knew that his policy essays were only well-founded and had perfect sentences, but lacked a soul. Ning Jen, Shenlang, and Jon Chong had all judged that his policy essays could definitely place high, but getting into the top 3 would be difficult. And the words of the great scholar Jon Chong represented authority. But this policy essay topic was exactly what he had studied. Shenlang had forced him to memorize over 1,000 policy essays, all of which were considered timeless masterpieces. And Liu Zongjuan's On Feudalism was an absolute classic among immortal works. To put it this way, among all the policy essays in China for over 1,000 years, Liu Zongjuan's On Feudalism could be ranked in the top 5. It was truly a treasure of literature, and it was particularly in line with the current political situation of the Great Yan dynasty. Today, the new policy of the Great Yan Empire was in full swing. The separation of civil and military administration and the system of commanderies and counties had all been rolled out. This On Feudalism, with a slight modification, could be quoted in its entirety. Of course, this world had no Han or Tang dynasties, but it had similar dynasties that were very much alike. In addition, some of the figures in On Feudalism did not exist in this world, but every world does not lack heroes and outstanding figures. Just change the historical figures in On Feudalism to the heroes and outstanding figures of this world, and it would be fine. The core of an article is its soul. Before, Lanfenzi's policy essays lacked a soul, but now, this soul seemed to be deeply understood to the bone. But Lanfenzi did not relax. He began to consider the thoughts of Emperor Ning Yuangshan. Because he represented the 5th prince, Ning Jen, his thoughts also represented Ning Jen's comments. So, he had to scratch the itch in the emperor's heart. The emperor had to be pleased. A great victory had made him a little impatient. As the weakest faction in the competition for the throne, what should Ning Jen do? Of course, he had to maintain consistency with the emperor, absolute consistency from the bottom of his heart, in political direction. When a monarch chooses a successor, although he will consider his own likes and dislikes, the most important thing is still to look at the direction of governance. The most feared thing is that when a person dies, their influence disappears. Of course, Ning Yuangshan feared this the most. He was worried that when he died, the son who succeeded him would completely negate his policies. This is the direction. I must use this exam to let His Majesty see clearly the thoughts of His Highness Ning Jen. Your Majesty, although you want the crown prince, although the 3rd prince Ning Kai is outstanding, in terms of political direction, they may not be of one mind with you. Only His Highness Ning Jen can inherit all your policies. After having a direction for his writing, Lanfenzi's words flowed like water. He did not completely copy Liu Zongjuan's On Feudalism. Of course, he didn't know that this was written by Liu Zongjuan, he thought it was written by Shenlang. And in fact, it was written by Shenlang, because Shenlang had processed Liu Zongjuan's On Feudalism once to make this policy essay more in line with the current political situation and history of this world. But Lanfenzi still did not copy it. He used On Feudalism as the framework, and then processed the wording himself, quoting evidence and historical facts, wishing he could write every word deep into the emperor's heart, wishing he could make the emperor slap the table and praise him, shouting kindred spirit after reading every passage. Lanfenzi began to write. What gave birth to heaven and earth? At first, I did not know. What gave birth to cause and effect? I still do not know. Then how to approach it? By writing, approaching the original soil. What is the proof? The proof is in feudalism. Feudalism had the ancient sage kings like Yao, Shun, Yu, Tang, and Wen. Only then could they advance. If they stubbornly refuse to advance, they could not stop the trend. When the trend comes, what stage will people begin? Without the initial stage, there can be no feudalism. Feudalism is not the intention of the sages. This passage was already perfect. Just copying the original text was enough. There was no need to gel the lily and make changes. Lanfenzi was extremely excited. Stunning words flowed out continuously. Once he started writing, he couldn't stop at all. In a short hour, Lanfenzi had finished writing over 2,000 words, all in one go, without a single revision. It was perfect, an absolutely timeless masterpiece. After finishing, Lanfenzi's entire body was boiling with passion. He knew he had succeeded. He didn't believe there was any policy essay on this examination field that could surpass his. Absolutely impossible. The top 3 were in the bag. If he was lucky enough in tomorrow's poetry and prose, the first place was in the bag. Ha ha ha, I've succeeded. Young Master Shen, Your Highness Ning Jen, I have not let you down.